Yeah, exactly.
Information.
Every now and again. Yeah.
Because my house was burnt down once.
Oh, how long ago?
You know what,
Before the
people
38
like,
hurricane. Built back on the same foundation.
our town engineer to do a good job, not feeling slighted. She does do a good job reviewing stuff.
Okay. Well, I guess we're as all here as we're gonna get.
Yeah, you're right.
You know, I can't find anything on this website.
You want us to move
anymore at
Paul up closer? Because we got
Yeah.
your seat.
Yeah, you can. Bring him on up.
Hank, come on up the front up here.
Yeah, you can.
You're up. Timmy's out. Timmy's out.
He's not here tonight?
No.
You can't get a reading from the station.
Oh,
Oh,
Henry's
yeah.
gonna do the thing.
The email I sent you.
Go over, pull the fire
Yeah.
alarm and get him over here.
I could do
Yeah,
that.
right.
He'll be wearing his costume.
Yeah.
You don't look as good with the hat and the turnout gear.
Okay. All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the August 8th, 2018 meeting of the Planning Board. Note that our first, I think, hour and a half is going to be mostly work session. We will be doing some discussion of things where we may hear some people from the audience. But and of course, we're being recorded, as we always are, by Chelmsford Telemedia. All right, that said, I believe first item on the agenda is a discussion of our flag bylaw and some of the intricacies surrounding that. And I see we have town council with us. Hi. Good evening. Thanks for coming.
Oh, you want to move up here?
Yeah, we'll give you a fancy seat.
It's special already.
So just on your handout and on the TVs, this is designated as Article 16.
Okay.
In the warrant.
Article 16.
So it's a placeholder right now. What's in front of you does not have the language. That's kind of the purpose of
Right.
having town council in tonight.
Yeah.
To discuss the legal framework as well as some legal options that are available for
Okay.
consideration.
All right, that's the rezoning one there. Do you have the, do we have anything particular on the flags yet?
Nothing drafted.
Nothing drafted,
So just a
okay.
placeholder, Article 16. Can you scroll down?
Gotcha.
Yep.
Just lose my mouse.
Okay, and that said, of course, the flag issue is a fascinating one. It involves constitutional issues. It has First Amendment overtones and such. And I think before we get too far, it's probably worth having some kind of understanding of what we can and cannot regulate. And I should also say that even things that we can regulate, maybe we won't regulate, or we shouldn't regulate. But what are our legal boundaries here?
Mr. Chairman, I think the first aspect that you have to take into account is that whatever bylaw you do adopt
Yeah.
with regards to flags has to be content neutral.
Right.
Okay, so you cannot treat one form of flag different from another form of flag with regards to nationalities.
Right.
Right, so you can't simply state, we're going to allow the U.S. flag on commercial properties and we're not going to allow any other nationalities'
Right.
flags on commercial properties. You can treat commercial properties differently than you treat residential properties. That is allowed. You can certainly impose restrictions with regard to length of time, size,
place.
location, things of that nature. You do need to keep in mind when you're coming up with these things that there has to be a compelling governmental interest, that requires that.
Yeah.
Which I think in most instances you'll be able to establish, depending on what it is you want to do.
Yeah.
But I think, for my purposes here, I think I need a much better sense of what it is the board is looking to accomplish with this bylaw before I can start giving you any suggestions of what you may want to do.
Okay. Good. Well, based on what you've said, I think it is worth talking about the objective here. We know that we had a recent incident in town when a whole bunch of flags showed up on a piece of commercial property. And it was deemed by some to be in violation of the bylaws. And that's what got us started on this path, taking another look. I think that the big concern that we should have is whether
Terminology.
for example, any large display of a number of flags creates any kind of public danger. If you had, 8-foot tall flags that obscured an intersection, you've got one kind of problem. If you've got a bunch of little, 1.5-footers, well, it's interesting. It adds some color to a little chunk of land, but it isn't going to interfere with the public safety, and it's not really anything that you could regard as a public nuisance. Okay, that said, those are kind of boundaries at one end and the other. So the question is, what do we want to do? Evan, have you gotten any input from the rest of the town as to,
No, this is the first forum. This is the
Okay.
first place to have the conversation. It is
Okay.
a zoning bylaw.
then we will start it. Why don't we run around? Okay, I see a hand.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I have a comment or a question for council, but you said that we cannot differentiate acceptability of flags, and I believe that you inferred that that was extended, that statement extended as flags of different that represented different political entities.
Governmental entities.
Governmental political entities. Is it true that we can distinguish between flags of governmental entities and flags, in other words, fabric, flying fabric,
With a commercial
that would
message?
be commercial advertising?
Yes, you can distinguish from those.
Okay, so I think, and I'm not seeing anything in our definitions that identify what a flag is, or that identifies that it would represent a political governmental entity as opposed to a fabric, fabric-based advertising media. And I think we really do need to put something in that differentiates that.
Okay.
On the other hand, I am not prone to legislate the restrictions on flags of government entities in any way other than traffic nuisances, traffic visual, that they don't inhibit traffic.
All right.
Just while others are pondering, to answer Nan's question, we already currently prohibit flags that are not governmental insignias. So if a Target flag or a Burger King flag, or a flag showing a sandwich or a car, those are considered signs because they're designed to attract attention. They're moving and animated. Those are all exempt.
So what I'm saying, Evan, is I think that under terminology, under Article 20,
Prohibited.
we should define that.
It is, it's defined within the, kind of the substandards.
Within the
of sign-
advertising, yeah, the sign.
The sign bylaw itself.
I think it would be useful to actually put terminology in with a definition.
Very good. Any other thoughts?
The way we got in this situation, from what I understand, I could be incorrect, is that we had a complaint from somebody that had the building inspector come in on them about different flags that they were hanging. Is that how we ended up in this situation to start with? I know we had a complaint from the building inspector, and they got about a multiple flags, and he was responding from a complaint from a citizen or a corporation or something that had a bunch of different flags. Is that how we've ended up in this situation now, and we're starting to work our way through it? Any thoughts? Any?
I can't tell you definitively whether it came in as a complaint.
Yeah.
Knowing Mark, if it didn't come in as a complaint, it likely would have still drawn his attention. The fact of the matter is that once the violation notice went out,
Yeah.
I think that's what struck the community
So
as
basically,
needing a conversation.
all right, so in order for him to take and send something else, what zoning law was, as an inspector, I don't go out and just make up
Correct.
laws
So-
of my own.
Right, so what's up on the screen is the provision that was cited. And it's number 1, and the specific terminology is except when displayed in connection with a commercial promotion. So commercial promotion is not defined. That's the piece that is subject to interpretation, and that interpretation is made solely by the building commissioner. So his violation notice indicated excessive. And then the public discussion was, well, how do you determine excessive? What's the appropriate amount of flags? Some said there is no limitation. Should all be permitted. And this is kind of the crux of the conversation, if we are to have one, is, is there a desire to continue regulating it associated with commercial
Yeah.
promotion?
No.
And if so, how?
All right, that's what I needed to hear.
Yeah.
All right.
So for my money, I'd be
Yeah, your turn.
interested in getting rid of for commercial promotion.
Yeah,
Can you give me the number exactly on what our zoning bylaw is? I can't seem to put.
108,
Under terminology,
195, 108.
yep, 195, 108, the definition of sign.
Ah, okay.
So it's not in the sign bylaw, it's under definitions,
Definition
terminology.
of the sign.
So the
Okay.
significance in this particular incident was because of the definition of sign, and having to do with, in connection with commercial promotion, that these particular flags were determined to be a sign. At which
Yeah.
point, then the whole sign bylaw is applicable, and it was not in compliance with that bylaw. If there was a determination that it met this exception, and therefore was not a sign, there would have been no enforcement.
okay.
Okay, I got a comment.
Hmm?
I got a comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, this whole thing about commercial display. It's an American flag. But the way this whole thing evolved seems like commercialism snuck into it. Or let's put it this way. There was a lot of stuff on Facebook, I'll just put it that way, that involved the name of the business where the flags happened to be. And so that was almost a backwards way of advertising, in my mind. And I'll let it go at that. If you read Facebook, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. On the other hand, arguably, if nobody had ever found a violation, it never would have shown up on Facebook in the first place.
It never
So.
showed up,
Okay.
but it was,
I just got a
Yeah.
question regarding the commercial. If you regulate the amount of flags that a commercial place can have, how does that fall into place with a commercial cemetery come Memorial Day when they have
Yeah,
flags
right.
everywhere?
yeah.
Interesting point.
So we do define commercial. Commercial is services for sale. There has to be a transfer of
Yeah.
goods, services, monetary
Sell sites.
transaction.
Cemetery plot?
Business. Commercial is defined as business. So I'm not sure cemetery would be considered a traditional place of business.
Well, let me ask this question. What would happen, practically speaking, if that phrase, except when displayed in connection with commercial, promotion or whatever it says, suppose we just eliminated that? What would happen? How would life in town be different? And I think the answer is, this stuff would never have been posted on Facebook in the first place.
Right.
Yeah.
And other than that, nobody would much care. And I'm wondering if that's the sense of the board, because if that's the sense of the board, working this into something to be put on the warrant is relatively easy.
I guess my concern with that is then what constitutes a flag. There are certainly ways in which you can throw, the U.S. flag onto any number of different
Right.
surfaces and say that it's still a flag. And would that be a way in which that would constitute commercial advertising? I'll give you an example. Very recently, there was the car dealership up in Drum Hill
Yeah.
came in front of the Board of Appeals looking for a sign variance, looking to put, what would appear to be hard balloons
Yeah.
out in the front of the property because they wanted to attract more attention, to that particular business. And the Board of Appeals denied that variance request, determining that it was, not really within the spirit of the bylaw. If you took those particular balloons and put a U.S. flag on them, are they now allowed? Or a French flag, or,
Yeah.
flags of 50 different countries? If you remove this particular portion of the bylaw, I think you can very easily make the argument now that that is a sort of thing that you can do
Okay.
commercially to promote your business.
No, that would.
And that's a policy issue for this board.
Yeah.
I just want to bring that to your
Okay.
attention. But
So-
there are ways to exploit it.
Now, there certainly are, and we have to have some place in the bylaws. Let's assume for the moment that we just said you can have any flag of a political organization. We'd have to be able to enforce the notion that you can't take something that is otherwise non-compliant and make it compliant simply by putting a flag on there along with other things. A flag, for these purposes, has to be some kind of a, sort of a self-contained piece. I mean, a traditional flag, of course, is self-contained. It's just the flag. But how do we keep people from taking it and, gluing it onto lots of other things, like the balloon? And maybe the balloon is okay if all it has is a flag on it, but if it's got a flag and some advertising on it, then it ceases to be strictly the flag of a...
So this particular request, I don't recall it having any request to put any wording.
Yeah.
It was simply colored balloons.
Colored balloons, okay, and if
So
they've
if
done
instead
flags, yeah.
you put the U.S. flag
Yeah.
painted onto that orb, if you will,
Yeah.
arguably, if
True.
you take this particular portion out of the bylaw, that would then become allowed.
All right.
Which if the board is fine with that, then that's certainly
Setting
okay.
aside untraditional
Yeah.
flags, if you remove commercial promotion, is you're essentially eliminating any and all regulation, unless you insert a maximum number of flags to be displayed on a property, duration. So you can play this out.
Yeah.
When the first business with a blank check, Drum Hill, somewhere on Drum Hill, puts up, let's say, along their roof parapet, puts up a large flag on a pole every 7 to 10 feet, and then maybe in the parking lot and their landscaping on their light poles. Those are all real American flags,
Yeah.
not attached to any gimmicks or anything like that. And then the next business says, well, they've done it, I now need to do it to compete.
And pretty soon we have flags of,
Right, so the current situation is that there's never been any creative uses of American flags because the
anybody
current
else's
current
flags, yeah.
provision doesn't allow commercial promotion. As soon as you put a flag on a gimmick, clearly it's a commercial
Right.
promotion.
okay.
So what if we, instead of deleting the last phrase of sign item 1, we modified it so that it says, except when modified in connection with commercial promotions. So it allows unadulterated flags, but you can't modify them such that they now contain promotional matter.
I think at that stage, you're going to need to define what constitutes a flag.
Yeah, I think we need a definition of flag.
Which I think
Really
I
do.
think we can do that, right? Some creative writing, you're still left with whether it's going to be a blank check, or if it's going to be
Right.
regulated, related to size, manner, and duration, things of that nature.
But can you, excuse me if I might ask you
go
a
ahead.
question. Can you regulate the size, duration, and what, the other thing, maybe the number? Or does this step into the zone of political signs where you have trouble starting to regulate that stuff? If a guy wants to put up a number of a particular candidate's sign on his lot that may be oversized or from what we think it should be. I guess that's the question I have there.
This only
Does it
regulates,
start-
it only regulates commercial, not residential,
Not residential,
correct?
okay. And commercial doesn't have the free speech rights?
Well, they don't have as much.
Right, you're allowed to regulate commercial in a manner that you're not necessarily allowed to regulate residential.
Okay.
I would say that they still have free speech rights, but
Okay.
they're not parallel to what you would have for a residential property.
Okay.
And I don't think that there's any claim being made or any argument that the existing bylaw is constitutional. I mean, you certainly have the right to prohibit the use of the flag across the board, not just one nationality's flag, but all of them in connection with a commercial promotion.
Right.
Okay.
Can't be used for advertising.
Since the bylaw has gone through, we've had one incidence with flags,
Two,
two.
So-
Is it,
that I can think of in the
is
same
it really worth
area.
even messing with it
So
over two incidents?
So the bylaw as currently drafted has been on the books since 1956.
Yeah.
Which kind of caught me off guard. I was blown away by that. It's over 50 years.
Right.
And I read the Facebook post as well. And just, my opinion for what it's worth, I don't think we've had a lot of problems with flags. In fact, the current bylaw
Right, covers it.
allows commercial properties to display many American flags of various sizes and various locations within reason. That's kind of
That's fine.
that's the piece that's not defined.
Right.
So then it's subjective.
Just to clarify, Evan, it allows the display of governmental flags.
Government.
Correct,
Anybody's
yes,
flags.
yes.
I like
So it's-
American
it's-
flags better.
So it's not as if we prohibit.
Yeah.
You can do temporary displays by right, without permits, under this provision here. You can also do temporary or permanent displays under certain zoning procedures. That's kind of my context of it. I think, while it may not have been the original intent, I think there is a strong argument to be made that this provision supports the spirit of the U.S. Flag Code.
No, I think it
agree.
probably
So I think
does.
it really comes out of community values.
Yeah.
Maybe this is too open-ended. It needs to be further defined. Maybe it's enough flexibility where if you exercise reasonable discretion and logic and reasoning, there's never a problem. But clearly, the most recent event identified that it doesn't necessarily meet the community values. And something may need to be changed.
So outside of the Facebook post,
Yeah.
was anybody on this board offended by those flags on June?
I liked them.
Then I gotta agree with Glenn here. I mean,
Yeah.
why make
not
a
broke,
change?
don't
Why
fix
stick
it.
our,
Yeah.
so why poke the bear?
Put your head on the chopping block if you don't have to.
Seemed like 1956 they made the right one.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
Leave it alone.
Okay.
But does that leave us in the same situation that another building inspector can say,
Correct.
You've got too
I
many.
mean, is this something that we can handled by simple guidance?
I think or any building inspector hopefully would look at what had happened in the past and say, yeah, I'm not even gonna,
Just for clarification, under the current zoning scheme,
Yeah,
the way this should have played out
Yeah.
was, it's a temporary display.
yeah,
Let's assume that everyone agreed it was for commercial promotion, or that they didn't think it was commercial promotion. If a proactive call was placed to the building commissioner, he likely would have asked for a temporary sign permit to one page to be filled out explaining the duration, how many, and the location on the property. And if the number was determined to be reasonable, they likely would have received a temporary sign permit. The temporary sign permit has some restrictions as to duration. That likely could have been worked out based upon the time of year.
yeah.
So, the way it rolled out wasn't ideal.
Yeah.
The bylaw
that's
itself
the
isn't
point.
necessarily a perfect fit for all proposed scenarios. But I think if the community understands that if someone truly wants to do a large flag display, whether they think it's commercial or not commercial, going to the building commissioner, having a conversation, if the building commissioner
Wouldn't be a bad idea.
can determine that it's reasonable, then he allows it.
Okay. In other words, let's not muck with it. Is that the sense that I hear?
Well said.
I like it.
Straw poll? Anybody want to muck with it?
Why don't we give it some time? I mean, this is the
Yeah.
first time you've discussed it.
Exactly, let's
A lot
let it
of
cook.
TV audience, give it some time to think about it.
Yeah, we'll get a
Right,
comment or two.
This public hearing will open on the 22nd.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That time
sure.
you'll have 2 weeks for the community to continue to talk about it.
Okay.
Board, think about it some more.
Good.
Yeah,
If you have any additional thoughts between now and the 22nd, email them to me. I'll get them to town council.
You could always write in something like, permit may be required,
Yeah.
something like
Yeah, give it
that.
some more thought. We
To
can think
give
about it.
somebody
Yeah,
an idea.
very good.
And,
Thanks a lot. By the way,
If I were
did-
going to
I'm
do
sorry.
anything, I would think I would change commercial promotion to commercial content. Because content is something physical that you can actually make an objective decision on. Whereas commercial promotion is really hard to say, yes, you're promoting or not.
Yeah, and honestly, I can think of very little damage done by taking your building and covering it entirely in flags. You
Yeah,
know,
exactly.
it's going to change the color, but what else is it going to do? Okay. By the way, the commercial First Amendment, isn't that Citizens United?
That's one.
Yeah.
Yes.
That infamous case.
And Reed versus Town of Gilbert, Arizona.
Yep.
Is really the very important one, the most recent Supreme Court case talking about signs.
Yeah.
So
I'll have to
anyone-
go hit the books.
Anyone
It's been a
interested in it can look that up. It's right on
Oh,
Google.
I love this stuff. I love this stuff.
All right, thank you.
Thanks an awful lot, Paul. Now, do we need him for any more?
Not tonight, unless he wants to stick around.
Yeah. Join the fun.
So just while we have a couple more minutes, back to the zoning article list. Article 17 is the minor revision related to animals accessory to residential dwellings. What you see here has been proposed by the consultation with the Board of Health. My understanding is that it's the second paragraph that is primarily the change. They're isolating chickens and other game birds from the existing 40,000 square foot requirement and modifying that to be reduced to no less than 20,000 square feet. And also adding that no roosters shall be permitted on a parcel less than 5 acres. So that's the Board of Health proposal. My understanding that the background to this is that there was a property, I think, within maybe in the Westlands. It came to the Board of Health as a violation. Board of Health regulates animals and livestock under their own regulations. but their regulations regarding chickens and game birds mirrors the zoning provision.
Okay.
So their recommendation is for purposes of chickens and game birds to reduce it to 20,000 square feet.
All right. I'm going to talk first on this one because I hardly ever get to. I'm an unabashed fan of chickens, having a few myself. We're not there yet. We will be getting there shortly. So I'm an unabashed fan of chickens, having a number of them.
Including roosters?
Well, there is somebody that occasionally makes a noise, but fortunately all of my neighbors grew up in farms, so. Yeah, that's a little bit, one of the difficulties you have is if you get eggs, if you're starting from eggs, or even if you're starting from chicks, determining the sex of a chick is not 100%, not a 100% deal. I mean, even if you get what you think are all hens, every now and then you get a rooster. But that said, I don't think we need to go there or play with that. I think, if a rooster becomes a nuisance, the neighbors will let you know, and they will let the Board of Health know.
So the point of tonight was
Yeah.
not,
Yeah, it's
not
not
to get into
that.
detail, but just bring it to the board's
Yeah.
attention. This is the current draft. This is what the public hearing that you'll be
Yeah.
holding on the 22nd will be opening with.
Yep.
Gives you a couple weeks to think about it, shoot in emails. If we need to talk to the Board of Health within the next couple of weeks, we can do that. I know there's an agricultural commission as well. So that's just kind of getting this out there so that the
Okay.
public and the board is aware of what the draft
Yeah.
proposal is to date.
Yep.
Yeah, looking at this in terms of chickens, I would be prone to modify this such that it does not have a minimum square foot for the first quantity, but required not less than 20,000 in excess for the additional units.
Yeah.
And the reason is we've been looking at lot sizes in the various zoning districts. And we have such an incredibly high percentage of undersized lots. Very, very large percentage of our lots are undersized for their zone. So even putting in this 20,000 unit restricts potentially half the properties in town from having even a small number of chickens. And I think that's the wrong thing to do.
Okay. Well, we can work with that then.
So I think it's just the purpose of it, the strategy of it, I think is good, but I think we need to do some wording here to deal with the first quantity versus the additional quantities.
All right, so then just quickly, Article 18 is the Historic Preservation and Reuse Bylaw. We likely won't get to that tonight, but I think we spent a good time on it
Yeah.
at the last meeting. Nan emailed out, and you have printed for you revised, the most recent version that we'll
It's a
go
cleaned up
forward with
version.
on the
Yeah.
August 22nd.
Excellent.
Last one for tonight quickly is Article 19. This came up at the last planning board meeting, at the planning board's request to revise the definition of a
Yeah.
dwelling unit. It's really related to the existing last sentence, and what you see in red is my attempt at resolving the issue that I believe
Yeah,
that the
actually, I think
planning
that's a
board was.
very good resolution. Thank you.
So this will be, again, something that we'll, in the next couple of weeks, we can think
right.
about and open the hearing on August 22nd.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks an awful lot, Evan.
Evan, for what it's worth, I had put a slightly different draft of that clause into the historic
I did see
preservation
that. I'll
change.
work with you offline on
Yeah,
that.
so
We'll have to,
we'll probably want to look at
Yep.
which one to go with.
So you just want to make an announcement that the other room is
Yeah.
open? and-
Yes, I will do that. The other room is open, and we are about to go into to our zoning work session on the Groton Road rezoning proposal or idea. So you're welcome to go in there. I believe the air conditioning is on, and you can probably watch it on the TV, or you can join us here. It's nice and cozy. Yes?
May I suggest you postpone this for a further date, because too many people are getting calls.
There's another room.
There's another room.
Right,
Yeah.
but they're not here. You can't see those
Yes, you can. There's a TV on
Yeah,
over
there's
there.
TVs and everything in there.
Well, what we'll do is,
Best we can do.
if you're sitting in the other room and you're watching it live on TV, when you want to come in and speak,
Yeah.
those people in the overflow room can come to
Okay.
this room and.
Okay, and
You're not willing to accommodate the residents.
no, quite willing to accommodate them. Let me make an important point here. This is not a public hearing. We will be having a public hearing. It's slated for 2 weeks from today, and at that point, we will go into the public hearing formalities on this.
And that's after you've decided what you're gonna do.
No, or have no intention of deciding what we're going to do. What we will do tonight is we're interested in the questions that people have, because that's what we're really going to have to start considering in earnest in 2 weeks. So I will ask for some people from the public to step up, and if they have particular questions about what is going on. I'm less interested in whether you like it or not at this point than I am as to questions that the board can consider. And then we'll do the full public consideration on the 22nd. So that's our current plan. And I suspect that will be a fairly full meeting.
Will you have that in a larger venue, like a school auditorium?
That's a good question. I hadn't planned
It's
it.
already advertised
For
per
this
law
location.
for this room. I'll work with the council to see if there is a legal mechanism to
Okay,
move it. Worst case is we can open it in this room, obviously would be continued,
yeah.
and then we can
Now,
continue
and
to
the other
another
piece
room.
of this is how many people are we really talking here? I mean, I see a full room here. How many people are out in the hall?
A lot.
You might want to take a quick peek and see how many there are. The other room is open, and I encourage people to go sit in there where the air conditioning is functioning. And,
We could,
yeah,
we could try and use the North Town Hall.
we might consider using the North Town Hall, but let's find out what the legalities are of that.
Yeah.
So we will investigate it.
That would be nice if it was in North.
Yeah, it is nice up there. And it's a fairly big room.
Nice, small community. We are people who
Yeah.
don't get in each other's lives, but we're there for each other.
Yeah,
We fight
it's fine.
together to protect our neighborhood, and that's why we're all here.
Okay.
We just spent
Well-
9 years protecting it from an asphalt.
right. Well, you'll have a chance to express those thoughts and views in 2 weeks, and we'll dig into that in greater detail.
So to expedite tonight, Mike McCall and I are prepared to do the presentation that the planning board received. However, this same presentation did go out on the abutter notification.
Right.
So I'm wondering if it makes sense, if people feel as though there's value to having the presentation. We can certainly do that tonight. If people feel as though there's time better spent engaging immediately in foregoing the presentation would probably take 15 minutes. Certainly value to understanding it, hearing
I
it.
think to get everybody on the same page and have us all starting with the same information, that might be good. You might want to zip through it fairly quickly, but,
All right, so let's bring Mike
yeah.
McCall, Assistant Town Manager, up.
hi, Mike.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, residents of the community. We're here this evening, really, an issue came up, a conversation with the manager about this particular area up west of Route 3 on Groton Road. He presented the idea of changing the zoning to the Board of Selectmen, who in turn made it a goal for the manager, and he's tasked Evan Belansky, as you know, the Community Development Director, and myself with working on it, and I am here this evening as the Assistant Town Manager, but just so the folks know, I also live in the general area. The three main reasons that we're here looking at this particular area is to ensure the highest and best use of our resources, to create convenience for the residents, and to maximize revenues by encouraging economic development. One of the great things about Chelmsford, as you all know, many of you have lived here for years, is we're uniquely positioned and easily accessible by a variety of manner. We're at the intersection of two major highways, Route 3 and Route 495. We have 6 sets of interchanges with off-ramps. We have convenient economic centers. We're in the heart of the Route 3 corridor, and we're positioned equally from Route 128 to the New Hampshire border, and similarly from both major airports. So we're a great area for people to want to locate their businesses. This is a map of Chelmsford. I'm sure most of you are familiar with it. You can go ahead. These 6 red circles represent the 6 interchanges with the off-ramps. You'll note that each one of them are located on a major highway, and at each of those interchanges is also a state highway. There's Route 110, Route 4, 129, as well as Route 40. These blue triangles represent our current economic centers. You have Route 129, you have the center, you have Market Basket Plaza, otherwise known as Eastgate, and you have Drum Hill. The only interchange that doesn't have any real economic development center is the one at the Route 40 interchange. This is a map of the area of North Chelmsford. It also shows Westford to the west and Tingsboro to the north. There's the interchange right on Groton Road. And I put 2 economic development centers because you can see, if those of you who live there, and I recognize a lot of faces from the neighborhood, economic development is picking up in those 2 areas. Up on exit 34 in Tingsboro, they put in restaurants, they have the gas station there. Westford is picking up their development over around Greystone, where the 300-unit subdivision was. They've recently put in a strip mall, as most of you know, with the Domino's. They're putting in more and more office space, and they're currently widening that road, if you haven't noticed.
In Westford?
Yes, Route 40. On a personal note, my son works up there. I go up there regularly. A lot of the traffic I noted is out-of-state traffic at rush hour. They're coming from Westford and Groton and going up Route 40 and getting on Route 3. So I will agree there's traffic coming through there, but then the majority of it is getting on and off of Route 3 and not passing forward, going down towards Vinyl Square. This is the particular area in question. On both sides of Route 40, to the northern side, there's residential property abutting or facing Route 40. Behind that, there's some industrial zone properties.
200 feet from the center line of the Route 40 road. 200 feet back.
Yeah, I'll be happy to answer any questions if we
And
get.
400 feet
Yep.
back goes to.
Ma'am?
Ma'am,
This
we
is
have-
not a public hearing, please.
So those of you who are familiar with the town, Rivard Trucking is one of the large establishments, as well as Loy's Elves has their yard over there. To the south,
On that chart, can I ask a question?
sure.
So if you go back a chart, the way it's drawn, it looks like the rezoning is coming straight through the electrical right-of-way. Do they plan to overtake that electrical easement?
We'll talk about that when Evan gets up. He's going to go into the detail. I'm talking more about the why, and he's going to talk about the how, but
Okay.
we're looking at keeping a buffer, and we're looking to maintain the buffer right around the electrical easement from National Grid.
Mike, can we just go through the presentation?
You gotta
Yeah,
stop.
I think we need
They're
to.
turning it into a
Stop this.
public.
May I suggest that we just go through the presentation and deal with questions after?
Anybody who lives in that area knows when you're up there, if you want to get to any of the other commercial economic centers, you're about 1.5 miles from Vinyl Square, 3 miles to Drum Hill, 5 miles to the Market Basket Plaza, 6.5 miles to Westford Four Corners, and almost 7 miles to Nashua. If you get on Route 495 or Route 3, you'll notice there's about 6 miles in between interchanges. And at each one of those interchanges, you're going to find an economic development center, again, typically with a shopping center, restaurant, gas station, convenience store, pharmacy, possibly bank, and some other
So we're
offices.
already saturated.
Excuse me, please.
As I indicated before, and this map is not a very good example, the gray portion is the industrial zone section that is located on the north side behind the residential, and both that facing property and the property to the south side of Groton Road are currently zoned RC. Evan may mention this, but it used to be RB, but we had a change in zoning a few years back to accommodate some of the residents that were also 2 families, so it's been changed to RC. This is the proposed zoning. Everything shaded in the magenta color we're suggesting CC, which is commercial, which could accommodate a shopping plaza up to, I think, 20,000 square feet without planning board approval. And in the golden section would be multifamily residential, which could be 55 and over housing, but we'll leave that up to further discussion with the board here. I did a rundown of the properties. I won't go over them individually, but it's primarily residential, with the exception of the 2 industrial, and the tax base in that area, in that section, if you will, between Route 40 and Route 3, is approximately $10 million, and it's generating about
Excuse me?
$200,000 in tax
Are we having
revenue.
trouble with audio in the next room?
The mic so the next room can hear you. Thank you.
I'm trying to talk to these folks as well.
Yeah, but you're presenting to us.
Okay. Next slide, Evan, if you would. In trying to come up with a potential for a tax base, I looked at some of the more conservative properties in the area and what some of the other interchanges have been doing. This particular sample takes from the Bertucci's Plaza, as well as a McDonald's, a CVS, an Enterprise Bank, a Market Basket, and an office building, much like the one here on North Road, just to give you a sample. And that would generate approximately $40 million of assessed value, which would bring the tax revenue to the town closer to $1 million. So there's an opportunity there to incentivize development, generate convenience for the residents, those people who don't wish to drive to all those other locales, generate tax revenue to offset the tax burden from many of the folks in the community, and to make the highest and best use of the property within town. As I said, when Route 3 came through, they put an interchange at every state highway. Oddly enough, this is one of the only state highways in and around our area that has not been developed. Evan? Is that, okay. And at this point, Evan will talk to you about the mechanics of the zoning.
All right, so I'll try and be as brief as I can. As Mike mentioned, back in 2011, at the request of the residential abutters that live on Groton Road, they came to the planning board and indicated that the vast majority of single-family property owners along Groton Road had a desire to be rezoned from single-family to two-family. So with their support, at the 2011 Fall Town Meeting, the planning board recommended and town meeting did adopt to change the zoning from RB to RC. So for the last 6 or 7 years, the residential properties along Groton Road have been zoned RC. I don't believe too many properties have taken advantage of that opportunity, but it is currently zoned two-family. It allows single-family and two-family. So Mike already outlined the proposed rezoning. Just to provide some additional context, the area on the north side of Groton Road contains 38 acres. The CC portion on the south side of Groton Road is approximately 7.5 acres. And the orange proposed to be RM multifamily is an additional 7.5 acres. So the next remaining slides are really kind of the nuts and bolts of the proposed zoning bylaw. We have hard copy handouts that have gone around. I'm just going to give a very high-level introduction. So the first step of the rezoning is a two-step process. The first step would be to, similar to 2011 rezoning, to do a similar action to rezone the underlying zoning from industrial and RC to what you see on this map. That would change the underlying zoning. It would not be treated as an overlay. So it's underlying zoning changes. Essentially what that means is existing properties likely become designated as pre-existing non-conforming. And in Chelmsford, that's not necessarily a bad thing for both commercial, industrial, and residential properties. The second step would be to adopt the same exact map as a zoning overlay, which is what the proposed bylaw is attached to. It's creating an overlay zoning district. So you'd have the underlying zoning changed in accordance with this map, and then you would propose to adopt a zoning overlay in which this zoning bylaw would accompany. So very straightforward. First section of a zoning bylaw is purpose and intent. It's rather straightforward. As Mike indicated, strategy is to maximize the opportunity of its strategic location, provides goods and services to the nearby community residents and in the regional marketplace, provide housing opportunities, mixed-use opportunities, probably most importantly, to provide orderly and quality development through the planning board process. Second section establishes the overlay district. It will indicate the specific properties, map, block, and lot that are included. I should indicate that the properties on the southern side of Groton Road are proposed to be split zoned. That's primarily a function of the overlay, and we can get into that in more detail. Next section is use regulations. All the underlying uses that would be within the CC and RM would be permitted. This section, as an overlay, considers some additional uses. Right now, what's on here is consideration to allow self-storage mini warehouse on the north side of Groton Road. I think several planning board members have indicated their preference to eliminate that as an opportunity. And then the second one is multifamily and senior housing per the subsection B, only on the south side of Groton Road. The multifamily that's being proposed is very specialized and specific to this particular proposal. It is restricted to senior and specialized senior housing, such as independent living, all-timers, assisted living, independent living, congregate living facilities. It also does allow opportunity for non-senior housing. Next section is labeled special provisions. Section A contemplates a provision that would provide a maximum cap on the number of dwelling units that the planning board could approve in the entire district. For purposes of a draft, I've inserted 300. 300 on those 15 acres, as I mentioned, equals 20 units per acre. That appears to be a zoning standard that's been acceptable within the community. And then the second part of that sentence indicates that of the 300, a certain number shall not be non-senior. And the theory behind that is that we know from the Housing Authority and the Housing Advisory Board that there is a significant demand for senior-friendly housing, such as one-bedrooms, micro-apartments, studio apartments, both ownership and rental. So that is the strategy behind this provision, is try to force, for lack of a better word, the desired outcome related to what types of housing development the community needs and wants. Section B is a customized dimensional table specific to the multifamily component of the overlay district. And the next page, still under special provisions, C and D are specific to providing measured and dedicated setbacks within the new RM district from abutting RB zone properties. I believe at this point the planning board has identified 80 feet as an appropriate setback for both for buildings and 50 feet for pavement and driveways. The right-of-way, the utility right-of-way easement was mentioned. That is 80 feet in width. That 80 feet is measured from the rear property lines of the properties along Groton Road inward to their interior property. So with that 80-foot easement in place, certainly no buildings of significance would be allowed by National Grid within the easement. So I believe that's why the planning board mirrored the 80-foot building setback from RB zone properties. And at this point, as I mentioned, the placeholder here is 50 feet So the first 50 feet of the utility easement would be prohibited to be used for any purpose, including pavement and parking. The next and final section of the proposed overlay is to tie this overlay back to the town Community Enhancement and Investment Overlay District. That overlay district regulates the regulatory process that the planning board must follow. And as importantly, it also regulates the quality of the development, the architecture, the open space, the mitigation that's required. It holds projects to a higher level, and I think at this point, the planning board has enough experience that can speak to that. Section B indicates that the Community Enhancement and Investment Overlay District it takes precedent over many of the other miscellaneous zoning bylaws. So, needless to say, I mean, the bylaw very often can be complicated. This particular bylaw is fairly straightforward in its goals and objectives, and as I indicated, is tied to an existing overlay district that provides much of the nuts and bolts as to how the planning board would go about doing their business.
Okay. Thank you very much.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, again, what we're doing here is not inconsistent with what we've done at the other economic development centers, including 129. It's a similar approach to make the best use, the most efficient use, the most convenient resources, and to increase the tax base that the residents have asked.
Okay, thank you. All right. Let me ask for one round of questions or clarifications from the board, and then I'm going to see if there are any additional questions that can be posed to us that we ought to be considering, and I suspect that there will be. So, which is just fine. That's why we're here. Anybody on the board have a thought?
I think I'll leave my questions till
Yeah.
the hearing.
Okay. Well, that may be perfectly reasonable approach to take.
I mean, it might be worth it to have some people email a bunch of questions too, that we have to read into.
That would help us a
Here all
great
night if
deal,
everybody has
because if we get it in
questions.
writing, we can actually work with it a little more effectively. But that said, it looks as if there's not any great desire on the part of the board to
I think
pose questions to ourselves, so.
the regular meeting's supposed to start in a couple of minutes. isn't
Yeah, it is.
But we gotta-
It actually, we have till
really
8
don't
o'clock.
have time.
We get,
Yeah, we need to let these people.
Yeah.
I
Well,
got-
Yeah.
I got one. I understand, Evan, the reason you put that yellow or that as this is a question, I'm not trying to answer it tonight.
Sure.
I've been rolling it around in my mind as to whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm looking at the yellow call it yellow or gold area. And I'm saying, is that really a good way to zone? Should this go all the way through the town meeting? Where the access to that is limited, the parcels are chopped up, and so I just leave it hanging like that. I've got a question, whether it should all be gold on one side or it should all be. I know the idea is to have a buffer zone to, I've forgotten the name of that street that's a circle below. Pardon?
Love it.
Lovett Lane.
And Burton Lane. We're both about it.
Yeah, okay. So I know that was sort of the idea when it was presented to us, but so I just leave that, Mr. Chairman. That's a question I've got in my mind.
Okay. All right. We done here? Okay. What I'm going to ask is that at this point, we're interested in questions and considerations. You may like it, you may not like it. That's another matter, and that's really that's maybe the major thing that will be taken up at the meeting of the 22nd. But I'm looking for things that we ought to have on our plates while we think about this. So that being said, somebody want to step up? If you do, we need your name, tell us where you live, and try to
Yes.
keep it short.
Mike, to clarify, things
My
that-
name is Marie
Hold on
M.
a sec.
To clarify, the things we're gonna take into consideration, are they gonna phrase this as a question, or are they gonna share with us their feelings?
Well, I would prefer if things were phrased as questions, but obviously,
One more
that's
question
always
for
not
you,
so
Mike.
easy to do.
Why don't we have them give us the questions, have Colleen.
So you're trying to
write the
determine
questions,
how
and then on
to
the next
restrict
meeting,
us.
Well, we will certainly
we
do
don't
that.
even-
Instead of trying to answer the
It's not a public
questions
hearing.
tonight.
We're going to get them anyway. I'm not saying we're going to answer any
We're
questions
not gonna
tonight.
answer any questions.
We're just
tonight.
listening for
No,
questions.
I want to clarify, my name's Marie M.
Yep.
Burnham.
Okay.
I live at 255 Groton Road.
Mhm.
Have been there for 25
Right.
years, okay? I want to make a statement that I find it appalling that after 9 years of defending our area,
Mhm.
that this is being done to us. But I wanted to clarify a couple of things that were mentioned in the description. The reason it went from single-family only to single and two-family is my neighbor across the street, who don't live there anymore. I know them by Paul and Diane. I believe their name's Olette. He built that house by hand. He built it from scratch. There was a small, degraded farmhouse sitting there. The town gave him a month from the completion of the house to get the other one torn down because it was so decrepit. He built it by hand. When he realized his wife was retiring, they figured out their finances and found that they could not afford the house finances unless they rented out a room. So they came before the board, and they went and got the petition signed, asking to make an in-law apartment in their house so they could bring in the extra income needed. You denied them, told them no way. They came twice. You denied them. After they made alternate arrangements for their retirement, all of a sudden, we could now do two-family. The reason why there's no business commerce there is over the decades, every decade, there has been an attempt to put something in there to taint this neighborhood on the Westford side. And everybody's fought it. Down from starting in 1959, basically, when they wanted to put
Yeah,
in
I'm
Route
wondering.
3. They wanted to put in a four-leaf clover. They stopped it. He's saying that it's forgotten. It's not forgotten. We fought for our right for our neighborhood. Now, obviously, you don't think residents are important enough as a tax base. Don't do that. It's my home you want to take away from me.
We haven't taken anything
But you're
from
proposing it.
anybody yet.
Proposing.
We are considering changes to the zoning bylaws.
Which
That is
changes our
all
lives.
we are
Let me
considering.
just clarify, because I think
Yes.
there is some confusion. So, we're aware that there's been a lot of discussions, private discussions that predated. So
Not
let me
just private, but they were fought in
let me-
town halls.
Let me just try to clarify what this means for the existing property owners within the proposed overlay, because I think there's some confusion.
I lose my way of life.
Assuming town meeting adopts the rezoning, that gives the existing property owners several choices. They can choose to do nothing and continue to live there and enjoy their property as they wish. They can choose to sell their property and take advantage of the opportunities afforded under the new overlay, which means that they're selling to the highest value to a developer, or they could choose to retain the property and develop it themselves. Under no circumstances does the adoption of the overlay require any property owner to take any action. It does not require property owners to sell to anybody. It doesn't require property owners to enter into agreements with anybody. The property owners still retain full control of their property, and they have an option of pursuing opportunities under the overlay.
So we get to keep our house, and you change our entire way of life by having all this
That
there.
this is really, what you're saying is relevant, but it's going to be relevant at the public hearing, which this is not.
Okay.
At this point, and
Okay.
you will, believe me, you'll get a chance.
Oh, believe me, I'll be there.
I'm sure you will.
I was there for 9 years with
I'll be
the
looking
asphalt
forward
plant.
to it.
Okay, they
uh,
thought we were nobody as well.
But
They thought we were
at this point, what I'd really like to get is a list of things that we ought to consider. I mean, this is a fairly big decision, and it may not get made. I mean, nothing may happen here. All we're being asked to do is to look at it and basically recommend whether we like it, and to make any adjustments that seem reasonable. But it
We
doesn't
fought
mean
for our
it doesn't
neighborhood
mean
'cause
we're
we
going to
take
approve it or not.
But
That
I'm gonna let the
said,
next person go.
You're up.
Because I've
Mike,
taken more
yeah.
than my
I got a
fair
question.
share.
yeah.
Are you going to terminate this work session at 8 o'clock?
Yes, we've only got, we're going to stop this at 8 o'clock. We
Okay,
have
so
to.
As you approach the
Yeah.
microphone, if you can be respectful for
Sure.
everybody else and obviously in your neighborhood, I'm sure you
Otherwise,
will.
you'll have to wait 2 weeks.
So I do have just a couple of questions. My name
Yeah,
is
sure.
Michael Walsh, and myself and my wife Jennifer live at 7 Burton Lane. Can I show you what that is on the map right here? Is that possible to show you, just to
If
clarify?
you like, yeah, sure.
I'm right here.
Ah, okay, yeah, I see where you are, yeah.
This is the first I've heard of this when I received this letter
Hmm?
4 days ago. And I would like to ask a couple questions.
Yeah.
And I think Mr. McCall, who is a resident of the area, asked who initiated this proposal. Can I ask you that question?
So, the town manager had brought this up, and I know the subject of conversation out there is there's a developer out there. Any given day of the week, there are people that come into this office with ideas and bounce ideas off of the manager, myself, the community development director. Have there been people that come in and ask about this particular area and say, wouldn't this be a great place for some commercial development? Yes, that has happened. But we, the town, are trying to be proactive and not reactive. We realize that somebody could come out and purchase some property and initiate a citizen petition to change the zoning. So being consistent with what we've done on Route 129 and our efforts at the other economic development centers, the manager brought it to the Board of Selectmen's attention. They made it a goal so that we would look at this, and we're bringing it forward to town meeting and to the planning board. And ultimately, it's up to the members of the town meeting to decide whether or not they want to do that.
Thank you. So with that being said, direct benefit, who would directly benefit from this? The town?
Question.
And then the last question, one of my other questions that you should be aware of, there is a developer that Mr. McCall just mentioned that is buying up all of the homes. And has that developer been part of this plan before all of the abutters and neighbors have even heard of this?
Not as far as I know.
Because there's a developer that's buying up all of the land on both sides of, and it's the same developer, it's not multiple developers, it's the same developer.
Who is he?
It's a company named North Star LLC, and you should Google them
Yeah.
and his practices, and it comes right up. His name is Chris Starr, that everyone has said here on the phone.
We know nothing about him.
And so I want you to do some research.
Yeah.
And then I would ask you, when you're looking at this, to come out and walk the homes, the abutters on Burton Lane and on Lovett Lane.
Yep.
And on Groton Road, to see what kind of neighborhood that is. And I'm all for development, but I'm against changing, and I know you don't want to hear that, but let's develop areas that are already made commercial, zoned in the town, not take away from, I bought this home 3.5 years ago. I've been in this town for 18 years. I looked at the town plan zoning when I purchased that home, and it was all single residences,
Yeah.
all around me. Now you're gonna put a multifamily up to, and Evan, we spoke about this on the phone, up to the easement. National Grid has already come by there twice this year, taken numerous trees down, and has widened that as maximum as possible. If you now take away the green space and the trees, the noise, the light pollution into these neighborhoods, and my value of my home and my neighbors' homes is just gonna go right down the toilet.
So, well,
And you need to consider that.
well,
'cause
what I gather from what you've said is, and you've asked a very good question, the classic question, follow the money.
I think there's something
Yeah.
there.
Oh,
Something
there's-
said,
well, it's
because
certainly worth
North
looking at.
Star's logo should be on this presentation somewhere, on the front page.
Yeah, well, I
Because
know
it seems
nothing,
like something's
nothing of
here.
them.
I don't know what it is. I'm confused too.
Yeah.
This is just 4 days of research that we've been working
Okay.
with.
Very good.
And there's two other things. There's rumors out there that you want to put an access road into Lovett Lane and into Burton Lane. Burton Lane is a private
Yeah.
street that was built in a cul-de-sac. And there's kids on that street, and I don't understand why that can be even proposed.
Well, it
through-
certainly
to the
hasn't been
neighbors.
proposed to us.
I know that, but it is out there. So once it all comes out, we'll
Yeah.
go from there.
So just
Okay,
to
thank
step in here, to follow up on what Mike was saying, his answer, This is one of many reasons why the decision was made for the town to take over this process, so that it's a discussion between peers to peers. You all live in town, you're all taxpayers, you're all voters. That's the intent of having this being a community-driven process or a town-driven process. If it were not a town-driven process, it's likely that it would have been a private citizen petition by any property owner who owns property can initiate a petition. That petition would force the community discussion and likely could have forced a vote at town meeting. This process, as Mike.
What type of buildings will they been building?
Whatever they want.
Whatever they want.
So they can,
Well,
any developer can build anything they want?
They would have had, they would
Whatever's
have,
acceptable.
they would have
in
had to make a
yourself.
proposal that goes through the planning board, but the town would have been reacting as opposed to setting its own course. As part of setting its own course, this process may determine, as Mike said, that there is no action to be taken, or it's not in the town's best interest, or the timing isn't right.
Right.
The alternative would have been a developer-driven process that could have forced a vote at town meeting. This process at least has multiple checks and balances before you ever get to town meeting. So there's a lot more community discussion, meaning the planning board is inviting you here tonight.
Thank you, we appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks.
That kind of interaction and engagement wouldn't occur, because the developer would be basically dictating the pace and the process between now and town meeting. So this provides a lot more engagement, peer-to-peer.
I look forward to the public hearing.
Well,
on the
yeah, I
22nd.
think the public hearing will be very lively, and we'll get a lot of stuff
Thank you.
discussed. Thanks. Hi.
Hi, my name's Virginia Timmons, and I live at 28 Lovett Lane.
Yep.
Respectfully, Evan, you didn't answer my question to my satisfaction, so I'm going to pose it again. And I also want to echo Mr. Walsh's comments about the concerns on the reputation of the developer who's been buying up the properties there. Just a comment, you've got a lot of residents here, and I see board members closing their eyes, which I think is very disrespectful. So I would really appreciate it if we could all engage together. Thank you. If I can point out my house, it's right here. And my question, along with others from Lovett Lane, is if you look at that drawing, it's not honoring that electrical easement at all. That line comes right to the edge of my backyard, it goes through the electrical easement, and it comes to the edge of my neighbors' backyards as well. So my question is to ask you to please go back and look at that and make sure the drawing is accurate, and so we know what it is we're reviewing, if that easement really is protected.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you for taking our questions. My name is Everett Olson, Jr. I'm a lifelong resident of North Chelmsford, specifically a 70-year resident of 140 Groton Road, right at the intersection of Main Street and Groton Road. I do believe, and I have questions, follow-up questions, that this was initiated by a developer, asking you and the town administration to make him rich at our expense. I want to ask, Evan, I noticed in the paper it said that the asphalt plant should not have any consideration on this issue. It has to have consideration. And I'll tell you why, because we live with an unending stream of heavy construction traffic all day long, from 6 o'clock in the morning till 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Groton Road, Swain Road, Dunstable Road, Ledge Road. Our neighborhoods have been turned into an exit and entrance to an industrial park. Our quality of life and the property value of our properties have been significantly devalued. I want to ask if it's the vision of the town administration that Route 40 be made into a Route 129, because if it is, you're going to have one huge fight at town meeting, because we're not going to let that happen. That is a commercial area, this is a residential area of the people who have carried the freight in this town for many years and built the fabric in the community of North Chelmsford. In your purpose and intent, it says to maximize the redevelopment potential existing underutilized highway. Nothing says that any entrance or exit to a highway has to be overly developed. Okay? 20 years ago, under a different town manager and a board of selectmen. I spoke to them for about a half an hour about a proposed development at this same location where a shopping mall was proposed. And we provided data that indicate that the traffic conditions would be overwhelming to the community and the existing infrastructure. And this will be the same in combination with the horrific traffic from the Newport Materials asphalt plant. It says that you want to address the local residents' access to goods and services. For 70 years, I have never had a problem finding a convenience store, finding a gas station, finding a mall, finding anything that I need to use to access goods and services. Never. It also says the purpose, one of the purposes and intent is to serve the underserved population. Nobody in North Chelmsford, including myself, has been underserved. In the 70 years I've lived there, no one has ever made a comment. I'd like the economic data to indicate that. I'd like the economic data to indicate that this interchange of Route 3 needs to be revitalized. Promote an orderly and effective quality development and redevelopment. Our life is miserable right now with the truck traffic from Newport Materials. I want to see the data on how that's going to improve the quality of our life, okay? I would like to ask, does this require a simple majority or a two-thirds majority at town meeting? Two-thirds?
Two-thirds, yeah.
All right. I will end pretty much there. I have a question also. If this rezoning is not passed at town meeting, what is the alternative, or what are the alternatives for development of those parcels of property? Okay. And I understand that, and I know Mike, and I respect Mike greatly, and the town manager greatly, and Evan greatly, but they don't live in that area. And we do. And we don't want to see it turned into a Route 129. As I said, I've lived here my entire life. This entire town cannot be sold off to developers at our expense, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you more at the public hearing. So thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Michelle Duval Callahan. I live at 194 Groton Road, almost immediately across from the ramp to get on to Route 3 North. My concerns are related to the reasons I moved to Chelmsford. One of the reasons I moved to Chelmsford was for the schools, and I know there has been some discussion about capacity at some of the schools, as well as the structure of some of the buildings and whether they're able to service the students as they are. So if we're adding more residents, I would like to know if that has been considered, the impact it would have on all of the schools in that area, the elementary school up to students entering high school, because that is the reason I moved to Chelmsford versus any other town in the area. I would echo the previous residents' concerns about traffic. My son likes to look out the window and watch the trucks go by, and in an hour we may see anywhere from 4 to 8 dump trucks, flatbed trucks, large construction vehicles. They're incredibly loud. I can't have my windows open because of the amount of smog, and we've had to power wash our house multiple times a day. I recognize that I live on a main road, but this is a sizable change from when we first purchased our house 5 years ago. I would also ask, when we're talking about, I know this question has been asked before, but I want to reiterate, no one asked me what I wanted developed in my neighborhood, because I don't need any of this. I agree with the gentleman prior to me that I have no problem getting any of the goods and services that I need. And finally, I do recognize that there is a need for senior housing in the area. I think that's something a lot of people would support. And if a practical proposition came up for that, that is something I'd be more receptive of. But as it stands, I don't see the need to develop this way. When I drive through Drum Hill, I'm aggravated with how difficult it is to turn into places and to get to where I need to go. When I drive through the center of town, I used to commute very far for work, and I could spend up to an hour by going from the library to the lights, trying to get to my home. So the traffic in those areas already is pretty considerable, so that is a concern for me. I don't want to echo those areas, and I noticed that there are a lot of business areas in town that are empty, that have for lease and for rent signs on them. So wouldn't it make more sense to fill those areas before we're building more areas, unless we already have someone who wants to fill that space? But if we're talking practically, it would seem to me we should build on the infrastructure we already have in place, develop those areas, get businesses into those areas before we're building new business areas without having businesses that want to be there. Thank you.
Okay, we have about 10 minutes left on this session, and again, keep in mind, this is a work session. We have not gone into a formal public hearing, although that's beginning to be what this is looking like. If you could keep it to questions that we should consider, that would really be helpful for us. Thank you.
My name is Jerry Hall. I'm at 34 Lovett Lane.
Gotcha.
And my question is, what's the rush?
Well, it's a good question.
I got a 4-day notice for this meeting. I've got the legally minimized requirement of 2 weeks for the formal hearing.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of information. I mean, you guys spent a half hour talking about American flags.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of questions and a lot of data out here that's roaming around in people's heads. And I'd like to have more than 2 weeks' time to consult with people I know in the know on planning and what have you. And
Well,
my question is, will you postpone the formal meeting at least till after next town meeting, so we can have some time to figure this out?
Well, let me respond to that. We are being asked to consider it for the fall town meeting. Now, our answer may very well be, guys, this isn't a hot idea, but that's what we're being asked to do. And in any case, I think the conversation that we have, which may go beyond next week, by the way, there's 2 weeks from today, will be useful, whether or not this shows its face at the fall town meeting. There's a lot of information to gather here. Thank you.
Evening, my name is Kimberly Bennett. I live at 25 Lovett Lane. I believe almost everyone here has the same reaction that I've had, Jerry's had, Mike Walsh has had, other residents. This is not really going over all that well. One other consideration is that Route 3 was already widened. That project was considered 12 or 13 years ago. I used to travel home from Boston as recently as a couple of years ago, and Route 3 North at commuter hour, even as early as 4 o'clock in the afternoon, is a mess. More people, including 300 new residents and all these shoppers and people who work in whatever buildings are going to be there, traveling on and off of Route 3 at commuting hour is not going to be a nice result for those who aren't even getting on and off the exits, just trying to pass through. So I would hope that some sort of traffic study, in addition to the impact on Route 40, could you please also do a traffic impact study on Route 3 itself? One of the earlier speakers had big concern about a developer. It's called North Star Realty LLC. The gentleman's name is Christopher J. Cox. There is a very long history of bad doings by this gentleman. In fact, he already bought a property, 77 Main Street in Chelmsford, just for his office. He doesn't even live there. I don't even know if that's zoned properly. So he needs to be closely looked at. He has financed through commercial realty. Good luck finding who that outfit really is. He's already purchased 4 properties on Groton Road. They were purchased at least $100,000 over market value or assessed value. Given the rate that he's buying houses, he's already, or with his financiers, has already spent $1.7 million. He has 4 more houses under agreement. We should assume that the extra money that he's pumping out to the buyers is similar. 4 more houses means 3.5, just as a rough estimate, that this guy with his finance people is putting out. Yet you guys claim there's no relationship with him. This gentleman and his companies needs to be carefully analyzed, and I expect, I'm asking politely, even though I'm getting fired up here, that as you guys move forward, if for some reason people think there's a reason to move forward with these ideas after August 22nd, please, please, please do extreme diligence on environmental concerns. We have turkeys running through, we had baby bears running through a yard just this past Sunday. There's a lot to be looked at, and there's a lot at stake, only so that the town can increase their tax revenue from $200,000 to $800,000. That disgusts me. $600,000 extra revenue? That disgusts me. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, Emily Antle, 9 Mansur Street. I do not live right on Route 40, but it's,
Yeah.
right there. So I have 2 questions. The first is, how will this help efforts currently going on in Vinyl Square and the North Village to revitalize Vinyl Square and that area? How will this support that? And the second question is, if this goes through, will you be putting in sidewalks so people can walk so that there can be proper foot traffic? Because that area is devoid of sidewalks and it's hard to get around without a car. You could reduce, if this is for local people, then sidewalks would make that a lot
Make a lot of
easier.
sense, yeah.
So,
Thank you. Another couple of questions. Question list is getting pretty good here.
Just not seeing anyone queued up, let me just
Yeah.
provide some additional procedural
Okay.
for the audience. Assuming that the overlay is approved, and assuming that a development is proposed, all of the development would be required to go to the planning board, either as a site plan or a special permit. All planning board projects require public hearings, a butter notification, technical departmental comments. More importantly to the comments this evening, it's at that point where, based upon a specific development proposal, detailed plans are prepared by civil engineers. The planning board requires traffic studies, wildlife environmental studies, stormwater, drainage, flooding studies. The town, via the planning board, requires public improvements such as sidewalks, bike lanes, fixing and improving traffic, not only along Groton Road, but extending to some of the intersections we've heard this evening. The reason that that's important is that it's not, as a town-initiated proposal, it's not project-specific. It's not being proposed to facilitate anyone's one particular vision or desire. It's setting the opportunity that the town wants to prefer, and then using the planning board's regulatory process to drill down to make sure that all of the site-specific and neighborhood-specific concerns are adequately addressed and mitigated, such as buffering, light pollution, hours of operation, traffic, truck deliveries, all the things that the planning board spends hours and hours and hours reviewing for projects. So that detailed level of information normally takes place, again, when rezoning is adopted, and then there are specific projects that are being proposed. So then the planning board and the community can actually look at a proposal, a detailed plan, and make intelligent determinations and ask questions that are based upon real-world proposals.
Thank you. Thanks, Evan.
Can I
Yeah, one more.
Yeah, I think we can fit one more in but you'll need to step up. And I'm looking for questions and things to consider.
Yes, sir. Wade Williams, 33 Lovett Lane.
Yep.
I guess the gentleman there, Evan, I'm a neophyte to this whole zoning and everything.
Yeah.
But I guess a question reference to what you just said, isn't it asked backwards? I mean, we all bought our homes. We all investigated where we were going to live. We all investigated what was around our house. Now, you're proposing to change the zoning in our neighborhoods, but if I understand correctly, and I hope I didn't, you're saying the detailed, and the studies I was interested in hearing about before we get to this stage, who did the environmental assessment, at least a preliminary one? Who did a traffic assessment, at least a preliminary one? Who did a noise assessment, at least a preliminary one? Because the town, as you're saying now, is doing this study, and this is what's being proposed. Did this just randomly appear, or was there at least studies done? I mean, to me, it sounds backwards. You're gonna, in theory, approve this, and then we would get to the detailed studies you just talked about? You would hope that there would have been studies of some form to generate this. Is that not a valid concern? I mean, where did this come from? Did it randomly appear?
Everything you've seen presented tonight, particularly Mike's portion of the presentation, is analysis that the town did based upon the why. Why would it be a compelling public interest to pursue exploring this opportunity? The details could be, there's too many what-if scenarios, because the zoning underlying in the zoning overlay allows all different kinds of scenarios, so it's impossible to predict traffic impacts, environmental impacts.
But you've come up with numbers. You come up with 300 units, you
Yeah,
come
but
up with,
that,
I mean.
yeah.
how-
So we
how
can,
did that-
yeah,
how does
so
that appear?
certainly we can provide projected impacts on that particular number. But that particular number is a number that I identified. That number, as I indicated, is based upon 15 acres times 20 units per acre. That equals 300. So that's just,
So similar, then there must be data to show, if the data exists for that, there must be basic data to show then that same numbers, the impacts it'll have on traffic.
we can definitely do
I
that,
mean,
yes.
This just randomly didn't appear. There had to have been some rationale for it.
We can definitely provide that level of impact based upon that 300 number, and then saying of the 300, X number are going to be senior housing, and X number are not going to be senior housing.
And also.
We can do that.
This area butts on, as you see, the wetlands.
Mhm.
So you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out that there's going to be impacts there. So before you even put that this was going to be commercial and multi, then someone had to have looked at that. And if not, why not?
It's taken into account, but the wetlands are protected. So-
Yeah, they are.
So what's the impact of this on the protected land?
Nothing, they're protected under the Wetlands Protection Act.
So by having 300 more people in
just-
commercial there is not going
But
to
you
be impact
can't,
on
meaning
it?
you can't develop on wetlands. It's all regulated via the Conservation Commission.
So you're saying there'll be no study done then?
Of course, if and when a development is proposed and it's within 100 feet of a wetland, it requires a permit from the Conservation Commission.
Why wouldn't the city do that before making this recommendation and agreeing to it?
The only way I can say this is that, and I know this is difficult, the last time the town undertook a consideration of a significant rezoning was over 25 years ago. And so many of the people who are in the room today went through a similar process. I don't think that the town required itself to do studies on something that the town wanted to do.
Studies making, the town is making a recommendation, you should have at least have the basic
We
fundamental.
we will have,
rationale.
I understand what you're saying. With the next, August 22nd, I will have a wetlands map, so we can identify where the wetlands are, and the other information that you've just
I mean, just
requested.
the basic, environmental, traffic, noise, impact on the school, these are things you should know
Oh, yeah,
before even.
we have that information, yep.
Okay, just not presented.
Correct, it hasn't been drilled down to that level of detail, correct.
Okay. Very good. Well, we're at 8 o'clock. I think it's time to wrap up our work session. I've got quite a list of questions here, which we'll dig into, I think, in some additional detail in 2 weeks. And, of course, I don't know how that session's going to go, but it would not surprise me that that might actually get continued after that. It's quite possible.
You want to talk about location?
Yeah, we'll work on that. We'll work on that.
I think we're gonna have to legally open it
Right.
in this room.
Yes.
Do the best we can for that first night. The second
Okay.
meeting that's continued, we can move it anywhere
Yeah,
we
see
want.
what you can find. See what you
Well,
can find.
I will ask counsel.
I mean, the other thing is we could always repost. What are the posting requirements?
The first ad's already gone in.
Yeah.
Yep.
Is this going to be up online somewhere, this document?
It's online now.
It's online now.
I couldn't find it.
It's on the homepage, the town
It's under a
homepage.
newsflash, one of the scrolling things.
If you email either Colleen or I, we can email it directly
Yeah.
to you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. That was actually pretty informative. We've got a lot to work with.
Take a 5?
Yeah, take 5.
residents. I think it provides benefits to the Westford residents.
These people said they don't want to see the data, they want to see the justification. Makes sense. It's reasonable.
Okay, let's get back to it. All right, we're back in session here. The first thing up is continued public hearing on 152 Turnpike Road. Let me remind you, this is seeking a determination of applicability under the overlays.
Hey,
Yep.
You missed one.
Arlene's Way.
Ooh, Arlene's Way.
That's a quick
Oh,
one.
okay, that's a quick one. All right, Arlene's Way, 44 Westford?
Thank you very much.
Sure. Glad you caught that.
You'll be here at midnight.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Greg Halladina, 56 Central Square, and I'm here for the owner of the property, Robert Laporte. This, as you may recall, was a two-lot subdivision on Westford Street.
Yep.
It's a 2.5-acre house lot with the house in the rear. There's a long driveway approaching it. The proposal was for a new lot in the front. It was approved by the ZBA, by the Conservation Commission, and ultimately this board approved it in January of this year. And there were some conditions. We had to do some minimal work, put up a street sign, connect to utilities. But in any event, the certificate of approval that this board voted on and approved said that a bond of $10,000 shall be established before release of any lot. And the reason we're here is the existing house in the rear is under agreement to be sold. So what we're asking for simply is a vote to establish a bond and release what is Lot 1, that rear lot with the house on it, so that can be sold. The $10,000 account has been opened. We delivered the passbook. I think Evan can confirm that. And it was delivered to the treasurer. So I think we're all set. We're just asking for a vote. And there is a certificate of release that I think Colleen may have. I have a copy of it as well, which we would ask for a
So we're
vote.
looking two separate votes.
Yep. Okay,
You want a motion on it?
yeah, and let's make sure we get the motions properly framed.
Give you a motion to establish a bond of $10,000 for Arlene's Way, 44 Westford Street.
Second.
All right, have a motion, a second. Any comments? In favor? Aye. You got that.
I'll give you a motion for a lot release.
What's the number?
Lot 1.
Lot 1.
Lot 1,
yes. Which is 3 Arlene's Way.
44 Westford Street.
Second.
All right, motion and second. Any commentary? All in favor?
Aye.
You're all set.
Thank you. Do you need
Thanks.
the,
I'll take it, yeah.
Yeah, we'll get that sorted out for you.
I can sign it tomorrow if you want.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, if you could take care of
I'll
it.
take care of it.
I can do it right now.
Yeah,
Want to do it right now?
I can do it right now.
yeah, pass it over.
There you go.
You want to sign it?
Yeah, I'll sign it. What's the date today? 8th?
8th.
Yep.
Pass that back.
There you go.
Coming back.
Get that. We'll get that.
Just need Colleen to take care of it, and
Yeah,
we'll get it to you
Colleen will
tomorrow.
finish it up. Thank you. All right, one down. Okay, now to 152 Turnpike Road. Let me remind you what this is. This is an applicant seeking to establish applicability of the overlay rules that we have, the Bayard and Seoid overlays, for the purpose of creating a 15-unit rentals development. This is not approval of that plan. This is only would be only a determination that under the Bayard and Seoid rules that the project could go forward. And what we would certainly do is if we see reasons why this project might not be such a hot idea, we will let the applicant know and hopefully keep them from spending any money they don't need to spend. But that's all it is, and it being a continued public hearing, let me first is there anything that anybody on the board wants to say before I jump right into the public hearing? If you could keep commentary to the issue of whether Bayard and Seoid apply here. Certainly if it were found to apply, an application would come in, and there would be plenty of
It's not
opportunity
a
there.
public hearing.
Yes, it is. It says continued public hearing.
But finding of,
Yeah, this is not a public hearing.
Oh, I'm
this is not
sorry.
a public hearing.
It's a finding.
Oh, okay, then this is
This is
incorrect
just a
here.
finding.
Yeah.
All right, then we do the finding.
This is not an evaluation of the design,
Okay.
or, this is
Oh, okay, I had that wrong.
an applicability finding.
Why does this say continued public hearing?
Because I did it wrong.
Got it. All right, that clears that up. All right, in that case, we go right to the applicant. And the applicant here? I
gotta
thought I
look
saw
at-
the applicant here. There you go, okay.
It's different.
Mr. Chair, we already in session?
You're in session, and we're not a public hearing, has been determined.
Right.
Thank you. How you doing? Good.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. For the record, my name is Attorney Melissa Robbins. I'm from the law firm at DeShane and Farrell. Also with me tonight is Matt Hammer. He's handing out the plans right now. Also with me is the JJN Realty Trust, who is the applicant, John Norton Sr., John Norton Jr., as well as Mark Sullivan. We were here a couple weeks ago to discuss this preliminary determination under your BAOD and CEIOD bylaws. We had some discussion at the last meeting. A lot of it was around the fact that the board did not like the number of stories in the structure. So we actually went back through and redesigned the project to contain only 2 stories. We actually still comply with the FAR here, so we kept the same number of units. We still contain 15 units, of which all of these units will be countable on the subsidized housing inventory for the town of Chelmsford. We also maintain the walkway up to the front of the, along Turnpike Road. And as you can see now, we're showing a bus stop / pocket park and a sidewalk that runs the length of Turnpike Road. The fire turnaround is in exactly the same location, so it would actually operate the same exact way, so we have no issues there. And again, we're only seeking a preliminary determination from the board. So the board only needs to find that this proposed type, size, and location meet your COID requirements. We're not asking for a permit. We're only asking for the right to apply for a special permit. I'm happy to answer any questions the board may have regarding this revised proposal. And Mr. Hammer is here as well to answer any technical questions the board may have.
Shall we go around the board? Who would like to start?
I like this a lot better than the other one, the 2 stories with the L shape, so at first glance, I think it's a big improvement.
I can't remember how big is the lot?
The lot is 31,202 square feet.
So if this was a 1 acre lot, it would be a 20 unit is what we're thinking about for the numbers. As a board, I think sometime in the near future, we gotta think about as we get our 40B numbers in, if we still wanna put that size developments in. I know that area, I don't particularly have a problem with it. I'm getting down a rat hole. As far as underneath the COID, yes, but we're gonna need to see landscaping, we're gonna need to see a lot of other stuff before on the next road, which you know.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah, I'd make the argument that it does not meet the requirements to, and the reason is I do believe it could use the BAOD. It's certainly in that area, and it's a residential utilization, multifamily residential utilization. However, the BAOD in itself, the only leniency that it provides is to not count underground parking in the coverage calculation. Other than that, it refers to the CEIOD. The CEIOD is not applicable to RM districts specifically. It has absolutely no no coverage whatsoever, but the CEIOD does state that if it's not addressed in the CEIOD, the underlying zoning applies. So therefore, the underlying zoning is the RM district zoning, and the RM dimensional requirements, which we have no leniency on in either the BAOD or the CEIOD, requires 5,000 square feet per dwelling unit. That would mean 6 dwelling units on this property, not 15. And for that reason, I don't think it's applicable. I think it is much denser than the underlying multifamily residential area that surrounds it, and it's inappropriate and inconsistent with the surrounding area.
Thank you. Would you like to?
Yes, and again, I'll defer to Evan on this one as well, but absolutely, the CEIOD regulations apply to all projects that are in the BAOD. The BAOD regulation made the overlay over this area, but it brought in the regulations of the CEIOD for this project.
Absolutely, but the only requirement that in the CEIOD that applies to this particular property, because it's RM zoned, is the statement that if it's not addressed in the CEIOD, the underlying zoning applies, because the CEIOD specifically says that it does not apply, that it only applies to commercial and industrial areas, not multifamily residential zones.
We can seek town council's
We may need to.
determination on that.
You may
My
need to.
my gut reaction is that the legal premise related to the town knowingly and willingly adopted the BEAOD, tying it to the CEIOD, intended to apply the CEIOD.
But there's nothing in the CEIOD that applies to multifamily.
Understood. So I think we'll seek
Yeah,
town
I think
council
we better seek
clarification
town
on
council
that.
clarification.
But we can all agree that the intent and the intent and understanding of the BAOD was that this RM property was included.
Was included
Yes.
in the
Yes.
in the promotion of multifamily housing along.
But we'll get clarification on that.
Okay, yeah, let's get clarification on that, and I think it specifically has to do with that RM piece. If this was IA, there'd be no question.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. If it was IA,
Yeah.
it would
This
be a
isn't the-
no-brainer.
This isn't the only RM piece either, and there's no
Right.
exclusion, it doesn't exclude RM specifically, excuse me, I'm sorry, this board's a little bit in my way, from the BAOD rules and regulations. So I'm not sure, I mean, it's a little disingenuous for a municipality to include units in an overlay district and then say you can't have the benefit of them. I would like to see town council take
Yeah,
a
I think
position
we're
other
gonna
than
need
that. But again, I'll defer to the board on their legal position, but that would be my position.
Let's get a reading. That's why
We
we
should
pay
have kept
him.
them here.
That's why we
You
got
should
it.
have kept them here. Yeah, because it,
Would have paid him for a couple hours.
the applicability, the applicability on CEIOD specifically says that it applies to CA, CB, CC, CD, and IA, and the dimensional standards that are supplied in Table 1 for CEIOD dimensional standards specifically applies to those districts.
Okay,
There is no mention
let's have Paul run
of
through that.
requirements for
But there is a specific section
multifamily.
for the underlying dimensional that says any dimensional regulations that are covered by the CIOD are decreased by 20%, or I think it actually
Yeah.
says it in the reverse horrible fashion. I think you have to be 80% compliant with the underlying zoning bylaws for the section that's subject to that overlay.
Okay, so you get 7 instead of 8?
No,
That's
it's not
7
an
instead of
increase-
6.
It's not an increase in density. It's in the dimensional relief that you're speaking of, where it doesn't say specifically RM. It says any lots that are included in this overlay can be 80% compliant with the underlying zoning district. And this is in the overlay. So I'm confused about the taking
Okay.
the position.
But the underlying zoning district gives you 6 units on this lot.
Yeah.
So if you have a 20% leniency because of the 80%, you can now have 7 units on this lot, not 15.
That's under the underlying zoning, but if you use the reasoning we've used before for other CEIOD projects, you can put whatever you can place in the floor area ratio for an approved project. And that's how we sized this project, which was an appropriate floor area ratio for a project of this size on this lot.
It's a blending kind of application of the flexibility that the COID provides.
Right.
Remember, the COID in and of itself is an overlay.
Right.
So forget the BAOD. If the COID only applied, the COID takes into account underlying RM zoning, and then it provides additional flexibility within the CEIOD overlay. So I think what the
Evan, I
proponent is saying is they're blending the two.
understand that, but if I look at the dimensional requirements table for the COID, it provides specific leniencies on the floor area ratio for the zoning districts, commercial and industrial. It does not provide any leniency definitions in that table for multifamily districts.
I'd also like to state for the record that this board has already approved a 9-unit townhouse-style project on this lot, which exceeded the FAR of this project that I have before you today, and is actually more impervious than the project that I have before you today. So again, I think it's disingenuous to try to block this project because you don't like the layout, where you've already approved a project where there's 9 units, and we've already increased the FAR, and we've already taken the benefit of this. This is just a different project on the same exact lot.
So we'll see town
It's
council.
what it is.
Get town
Okay.
council to give us a reading on that, because I don't want us to do anything that would be challengeable.
So, Mr. Chair, what's your position? You'd like to continue till we get town council?
I think that's probably our best bet. We should be able to get that reading pretty quickly. I mean, it's
Oh,
gonna take them an hour, but
certainly, yeah.
Mr. Chair, do you want to get the comments from the rest of the board
Yes,
I think we should.
tonight, though?
I would appreciate that as
Yeah,
well.
let's
If-
do
If
that.
the legal if argument comes out well, I would like to hear the feedback of the rest of the
Okay,
board.
let's do that.
So Nan, just clarify, if town council came back and affirmed that this was appropriate, the 15 units, is this project acceptable?
I think we have a problem with this project anyway because of the compatibility with the surrounding area, that it's surrounded by RM that is a much lower density RM. And COID, one of the criteria of it is that it's compatible with the area. I mean, COID is a special leniency set of requirements that also has obligations that come with it, not just the leniencies. It's a trade-off. It's a partnership handoff. So you give some, take some on it. So I'm still concerned about it, even if they come back and say that, oh yeah, we really did mean to put it in there, but we didn't write it in.
So, but the 6 or 7 units would be okay? Is
I
that-
think so. Yeah.
Well, personally, I like the looks of the L-shaped building myself. I don't think the density is as bad as you think it is. I think it fits perfectly fine with the surroundings. I'm perfectly fine with it. Ed?
Okay, I appreciate changing the design to get us down to 2 stories. If this were to go ahead, I think you could make this building less obtrusive with berms and other things, but that's for another meeting. I too would like a readout from the town council just to make sure you don't, whatever happens doesn't face challenges, at least at that level. So, that's where I stand on it right now. I like this one better than I liked the first one. This one's a lot better.
Thank you, and we took into account all your comments at the last meeting and incorporated that into this plan.
Go ahead. The other comment that I was just thinking of, this is 15-unit, 1-bedroom apartments, correct? So if you put a 6-unit, 3-bedroom apartment in, wouldn't it be a lot more dense than 15 one-bedroom units?
Glenn, I'm just looking at the
I know,
regs, you know?
I'm not picking on it, I'm
yeah.
just saying, I don't think
Yeah.
the size of it is really, I don't think it's that far out of whack, to be perfectly honest with you, with everything else that's in that area.
I think it would be appropriate to walk that property.
I would too.
I think that looking at that neighborhood would be appropriate.
Yeah, I know right where it is, I know
Yeah.
exactly where it is.
Anybody else? And I'll make my comment. I think walking the property would be nice, but I think it's premature.
Right.
We're really looking at the Bayard Seoid question right now. I have other concerns, and I just want you to know that I have them, but those concerns are not appropriate at this hearing. They'd be appropriate at a follow-up hearing for special permits. So with that said, I think the smart thing for us to do is get a reading from Paul, and I'm going to hate to continue you forever and ever, but it's the way these things go sometimes.
I understand. And I will grant Evan the extension of the 2 weeks to the next planning
You
board
guys
meeting.
good with that? That's excellent. Okay, so.
So that we can get a determination, because either way, we would want that from town council.
Right, and I mean, if we get a determination that this is applicable, then
Then you
know,
go forward.
I'm
Speed
at least
things up.
satisfied with the Bayard Seoid part.
Could we do a determination on it pending Paul's recommendation?
I think we'd best find out. He may have some subtleties in what he reports to us that we may need to consider. I think we might be safer waiting on that, and I think we can arrive at a decision fairly quickly after we get his decision. Any further comments?
Want a motion to continue?
Yep.
Motion to continue. Second.
I have a motion to continue in a second. All in favor?
Aye.
And I want to thank you guys for granting that continuance in there, or that granting us the extra time. Thank you very much. Okay. So this next one must really be a continued public hearing.
Okay.
Okay, 197.
Do we have any letters or anything?
Huh?
Do we have any letters or anything?
I believe we do.
Yeah, well, let me
got a
get
couple.
let me get the thing here.
Such a headache.
We had a couple passed over to us by Colleen.
I'm a diet, losing weight.
Yeah, those, the ones I handed
Blood sugar's
you are
off.
the only ones there.
Okay.
So don't bother looking. I handed them to Mike.
Did I hand them over
he's
to?
got 'em.
We all get these.
Who's got 'em?
Don't tell me you lost them.
I don't know, they pass them to the left.
Did you lose them?
Washington.
Wait a second.
Oh, no, yeah. I do like my, I can't.
It was 38 degrees with a 40-mile-an-hour wind at the top.
Oh, yes, I have it right here.
There you go.
It's got like any air conditioning you could ever want.
Anybody feel like reading it, or shall I?
Well, that was the question I was gonna ask. Well, we all got these. I'd like to throw a motion out
What did you
for
have
you.
in front of you?
I have the fire
letter?
prevention review.
That's a departmental letter.
That's a departmental letter.
Departmentals you should read, but,
We only have one, you don't have
okay,
them.
all right,
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, those we typically read in.
okay. I was gonna waive reading of the,
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's a subject we should consider in greater detail, because I think your idea has some merit.
yeah.
Okay, I have a letter here from Fire Prevention Review, dear members of the Planning Board, with regards to the proposed gate restricting access to the loading area for Billricker Road. The proponent's engineer and I met last week to discuss the issue. Ms. Enright and I discussed my safety concerns regarding the gate, and also we discussed the proponent's desire to maintain the gate and the reasoning thereof. This department is committed to working with the proponent and their development team to find a workable plan on this issue that provides a mutually acceptable solution using any one of a number of available technologies. In the event a mutual beneficial solution cannot be agreed upon, the gate shall be removed and other options for access control shall be examined. This department approves of this plan with this change and stipulation and requests that the board make this letter part of their approval process. Daniel Kutsofis, Captain, Chelmsford Fire Department. Okay, so I think we've gotten to some degree of agreement there.
take
File
care of
it, give it a
Take
check.
care of it.
Okay, gotcha. And now, get back to my copy of the agenda. You're on.
There was, yeah, there's a Board of Health letter too.
There's Board of Health, oh,
He found it.
is that what this is? Okay.
It's attached.
Want me to read
Board
it?
of Health, yeah, why don't you take this one, it's an attached letter.
Okay. Okay. See attached letter. Dear Planning Board members, after meeting with Katie Enright, After meeting with Katie Enright today and reviewing the revised site plan submitted for property located at 197 Billrica Road for the construction of 2 commercial/retail buildings totaling 12,845 square feet, 132 parking spaces, and associated site improvements. The Board of Health has approved the addition of 2 more dumpsters at the location indicated on the revised plan. In total, this site plan now shows 3 dumpsters and 1 recycling dumpster, which will all be enclosed according to regulation. This property will be required to have the dumpsters emptied in compliance with the residential pickup schedule and not the commercial schedule. Susan Rosa, Board of Health Director. And, Public Health Director. Okay, and I've got a little sketch here, so.
Yeah.
Do you show, Katie, do you show that up there? Yes. Ms. Enright, do you show that up there? Okay. Yeah.
All right.
All
That-
right.
For the letters, you're on.
Good evening again, members of the board. For the record, Attorney Melissa Robbins from the law firm of Shane and Farrell. Also with me tonight is Katie Enright from Howard Stein Hudson and Dave Guthrie from Kinlock Retail LLC. You guys have taken most of my thunder in that you've already read the letters. So I was going to tell you about all the work we had done and that Katie had met with the fire department, had met with the Board of Health, and really had resolved many of the bigger issues that we had dealt with at the last meeting. As you can see from the revised site plan, we also adjusted the building over, which we had discussed at the end of the last hearing to address the concerns of the setback to the closest abutter, FAL nominee trust. And I think that Frank and Alice, who are the nominee trustees, were here at the last meeting to talk about some of their concerns. Katie's also met with Christina to go through the engineering, and I'll let Katie speak briefly to some of the revisions there.
Good evening, Katie Enright with Howard Stein Hudson. As the letter stated, I did meet with the fire department just to kind of clarify what their concern was. Even though the cycle through the lot would be counterclockwise, essentially they wanted the ability to be able to come in that driveway if necessary, rather than just leave that way. So if it became the most convenient way to do that. So what we're going to look at is an automated gate that allows them to do that without exiting their vehicle and having to unlock and or move anything from the exterior. So they were willing to work with us. There's a lot of technology out there today to either, whether it be open when the fire alarms go off, open when the fire truck gets there, et cetera. There's a lot of different options there. We're going to work with them to come up with a satisfactory one. Regarding the Board of Health was concerned that there wasn't enough dumpsters on the plan and the proximity to the restaurant. So I was able to sit down with your Board of Health agent, Sue Rosa, and also Mark last week to discuss the dumpster locations. We talked a little bit about the pedestrian friendliness of this project, the many front sides of this building, how there really isn't there's not an appropriate place to put it touching the restaurant. So what we did was we kept most of the dumpsters to the back of the property where we had them previously, and we moved one dumpster up into the corner in this area here of the parking lot, which brings us just that much closer to the restaurant. So that was satisfactory to the Board of Health. One of the conditions that I'm sure that the neighborhood will also be happy to agree with is these dumpsters need to be put on a residential type schedule, so they're not being dumped at weird times, odd times, to be disruptive to the neighborhood, especially with that one getting a little bit closer than the previous location. We've also worked through, as Melissa said, we've shifted the building over that 6 feet. to make sure that we have the 25-foot offset at that side. And we'll be working with the neighbors to continue to extinguish that easement that runs through the property, through the middle of Frank and Alice's property. And in exchange, we will be getting an easement on that 12-foot strip right to the side of the loading area there. So we no longer have to do a wall, and we can add some additional plants in there. We can do some grading and fit the sidewalk in too on that side. So there's now a sidewalk also that connects from Billricker Road up the side and into the patio area in front, so that people don't have to go all the way around the building to get into the patio area in the central location. I did also meet with Christina Papadopoulos yesterday and went through the comments. We've addressed, I believe, most of the comments at this point. There's a few housekeeping items that we're going to clean up before Mylars, and then a couple of items that will come out in the design process as we move towards construction drawings, and we'll cycle back with her office at the time of construction drawings. We did also go to Conservation Commission last night, and they will be issuing us an order of conditions. They closed the hearing and approved us last evening. So I believe that covers the majority of what we had at the last meeting, so we're here to answer any additional questions you may have.
Okay. Very nice, thank you. Thank you. I believe that does answer pretty much everything we had. Evan, can you think of anything else that was on our list? Ed?
I got new ones.
New ones.
Still a public hearing, right?
Yeah. As a matter of
Okay,
fact,
so
I will
when you're
open it
ready-
up to the
when
public in
you're
a
ready.
minute. Go ahead, Ed.
Okay. I'll take the two easy ones first. There's three of them. Like to see something, I'm assuming this will probably get approved. So in our decision, I'd like to see some condition that prevents the growth of an outdoor refrigerator at some time in the future. There are, if you go behind Summer Street, outdoor refrigerators, I'm sure they're all properly permitted, and at a few Dunkin' Donuts around the area, outdoor refrigerators have sort of popped up on a building. And so I wouldn't want to see that pop up towards the alley. So that's number one. Number two, I'd like to see something in the decision about, and I don't think we talked about this, the lights being dimmed or extinguished after closing time, at some point after closing time. The parking lot lights, like half an hour or three-quarters of an hour after closing time, whatever's appropriate. Or knocked down. 50% of them are knocked down.
Sure.
Just we do have residences in the area, and all I can assume is that they're gonna be there in perpetuity.
Sure, and I think we've done this before, Mr. Rue, in other commercial buildings where we've timed it. I think it's a little bit after to allow staff and.
Yeah, I said half an
Yeah.
hour or three.
Yeah, and then there's also we'll work with the police department just to see what they want left on for safety
Right.
reasons, but we're just
Yeah, I don't
satisfied with the conditions.
Great.
Yeah, fine. The third one's gonna be a little tougher, but we had that condition on a restaurant out on a proposed restaurant on 110 that was near condo developments. Odor control on the kitchen exhaust. So, I think we should have that as a condition of approval. We had that on the
Yeah, we did.
it's an apartment building being built today on 110, but prior to, it was an approved restaurant. So,
Would be amenable to that condition.
okay, on the
That's good
kitchen
practice.
exhaust.
Yes, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's just, those are,
If I remember right, didn't they say on the exhaust stuff, the new exhaust stuff was already being
it's already
built that way?
Built into the.
well, I'm not an expert on the area.
No, they said that
on
at the,
that
at
area.
the last, that hearing on the 110 thing, that the new,
George was saying something
Yeah.
about that the new
new stuff is already
integrated
does
it,
that.
but I wanted to
Yeah.
make sure that if it
Only if
isn't,
George were on the board.
Yeah. His ghost is behind me.
but I just wanted to make sure that if it isn't there, it will be
Yeah.
there.
Okay. Is that it?
That's it for
Doing
me.
out there.
Mine go off every once in a while.
Truck in the back left corner.
That's Henry.
That's Henry's.
Mr. Burr, we also don't have an issue with adding a condition about the outdoor refrigerator.
Okay, yeah, I have a feeling your equipment will deal with that just fine anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he would be parked over here.
Okay,
Is it yours?
Might be.
Katie?
We're gonna,
You gonna vote, Henry?
we're gonna continue.
jeez.
We're gonna continue to work with B.
You stopped it?
No, it's still going.
Speaking about being quiet for neighbors, 1 second.
All right, give us 2 minutes while we reset a car alarm.
Well. That damn AC. Right in the seat. Yeah, you think it's great.
You can continue to public. But it was his.
No. We'll wait till Henry gets back.
Let the record show we're taking a brief pause while a car alarm is reset.
Sorry about that.
Okay,
right.
you may continue.
I just wanted to mention too that we are going to be continuing to work with the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee on bike rack locations and style with the architect and the landscape architect. So
Gotcha.
make sure that a condition of approval is also that bike racks be added to the plan too.
You're good with that? Okay.
Just to quickly give an update on the public roadway infrastructure improvements. If you recall at the last meeting, there was mention of application, a Mass Works grant application being submitted. That will be submitted this Friday.
Okay.
And as I don't recall how much detail was provided at the last meeting, but that grant application will propose to leverage the private investment in this project, seeking Mass Works funds to build sidewalks, granite curbing, dedicated bike lane from Industrial Drive to Apollo Drive. It includes a minor roadway widening to accommodate a dedicated left turn lane.
Excellent.
From Billerica onto Ciencia, as well as a dedicated signalized pedestrian crossing, which is known as a Hawk system, at the vicinity of Apollo Drive crossing Billerica Road.
Good. So that's all in the works.
That's all in the works, and then I believe within the some of the project narrative, correct me if I'm wrong, the applicant has indicated that if for some reason the Mass Works grant is not successful, they are committing to doing the sidewalk along your frontage.
Along the Billerica Road.
Oh, Billerica Road, correct.
The residential driveway with all the ADA ramps, the restriping only of Billerica Road in front of the site to accommodate the lecture.
Correct.
Very good.
So we'll accommodate that into the
right.
into the decision.
Okay, so before I open this up to the public, any further?
I'm good.
Terry, okay, this being a public hearing,
I did take and do the Mullen, so
Huh?
I can vote. I did do the
oh,
Mullen.
you did do the Mullen, thank
Yep.
you. Let the record show that Henry did the Mullen. That's not a fancy dance, that's it's a piece of
Just had
paper.
to come in early.
Yeah, you have to come in early to do the Mullen. You're on.
Good evening. Chris Bowman, 3 Julio Street, Precinct 4 Rep. And I have a few concerns.
Okay.
First, I'd like to acknowledge that the project did change the setback from the minimum side yard from 19 feet to 25 feet. So that is consistent with the CEIOD for bare minimum setback from residential use. However, I noted when looking at the drawings, the 25 feet setback is only indicated from 199 Billerica Road to the restaurant / retail building. From the residential boundaries where the parking lot is, there is no indication of what that distance is. So that should be added in just for clarity, consistency, and to ensure that there's no misunderstanding on either party's part. The other change was minimum front yard from the proposed 20 feet to 14.5 feet. That was in order to allow the 25 feet for the setback from residential. So that is the preferred method of doing it in order to give more of a buffer zone for the residential properties. In addition, I noticed that the number of parking spaces decreased from 133 to 130. Okay. Okay, so the 25 feet setback is on sheet 2 of 11. Okay, so at the last meeting, in order to increase privacy for the residents, we also requested that the 6-foot-high stockade wall be revised to a 10-foot-high, not only for privacy, but also to reduce noise and light pollution. In addition, and that has not changed, we also requested 3/4 lighting caps on the lighting in order to reduce the amount of light pollution escaping beyond the project site zone area. Now, on the lighting, I'm talking about the tall lamps. They do have a horizontal cap, but it's not clear whether that cap is solid or diffuse. So I couldn't tell. So something, even if it goes this way instead of straight down, will help to keep the light where it's supposed to be on the project site and not intrude upon the abutting residences. Okay, now, as far as the crosswalk goes, on sheet 2, there is in there the crosswalk at the Sentia Drive and Billerica intersection. So the idea is that the Apollo employees would walk along the road from Apollo, which is opposite from where the proposed site is, which is 0.1 miles, by the way, and go up and cross at the Sentia Drive and Billerica Road intersection with all the appropriate signs and lights. Now, what is not on the plans and what the developer stated last meeting and then just restated here is that they also intend on putting a crosswalk from Apollo Road to the driveway of 205 Billerica Road. The residence there is directly across from Apollo Road. There is no need to put a crosswalk there. The employees have no need to go to 205 Billerica Road. And any signage and lighting there for any pedestrian crosswalk would be an eyesore. It's totally unnecessary and would decrease the property value of that resident. So it is totally unnecessary and unneeded. If the project wants 2 crosswalks, they can put them up near where the project site is, but also not to intrude 199 Billerica Road either. Now, just for your information, I measured the distance from the top of Apollo Road where it meets Billerica Road. The first building on Apollo Road is about 0.1 miles from Billerica Road. The building furthest down all the way at the end is 0.3 miles from Billerica Road. So I'm sure that employees are going to want to maximize their enjoyable lunchtime. They're not going to be walking there. They're going to be using their cars. That's not to say that other employees may or may not be walking, but I just wanted to put that out there so you know. Right now, I did specifically measure the distance from Sensia Drive to 205 Billerica Road. That is also 0.1 miles. So, and it's all open there. It's all open to 205 and 199. So any sort of signage or lighting for a pedestrian crosswalk would distinctly be an eyesore. And where it's unnecessary, there's no need to do it. Okay, on sheet 1, under the heading of site plan and special permits, what is indicated is section 195, 143, purpose and intent of the BAOD, where the project is apparently seeking special permits, but the correct section would be 195-145, use regulations under the BAOD, where that 195-145B specifically addresses commercial by right activities under the BAOD, and this is what the developer is seeking. Is seeking special permits to change the by right dimensional standards from Table 1 of the CEIOD site and building dimensional standards. So, all in all, this project, again, is specifically the kind of project that was meant to be put in place with the BAOD. However, the BAOD was primarily for redevelopment and renovation of existing buildings that have been empty for years and years. This is a new build, and it's in a pine grove. So, and also, this type of project was meant to be between Alpha Road and the Chelmsford Billerica line, or at least up until the bridge before the Route 3 intersection. That's where the commercial office buildings are, on both sides of the road. In this particular area where this project is, there is nothing there. Nothing. The residents are there. There's a company behind there, and then the company's on Apollo Road. Except for the company that is off on Sensia Road, there is really no walkable distance. So I would just like for the board to consider that, and that all in all, this project is very ambitious for this small 2-acre parcel of land, especially where there are residents right there. They're going to be impacted severely by this project. And I thank you, Ed, for bringing up not only lighting, but also control of odors from the restaurant.
Yeah, you jogged my mind on it last meeting.
Yeah, I thank you for that, because no one's going to want to smell that 24 hours a day. And when one person has been on that property, her family has been on that property for 100 years. So there should be some consideration for these residents and how this is distinctly going to change their quality of life in order to minimize the impact, regardless of how much the town wants this project, regardless of how much the developer wants to develop this project. There's other land available, other things could be done. So I appreciate you listening and taking this into consideration. And I did email everybody a copy of this, and Evan and Colleen as well. So I thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, Brian?
Brian Latina, Precinct 4 Town Meeting Rep, and I live at 15 Jesse Road. This project is in, I heard it stated, in a pine grove. It's kind of the last pine grove in that area. And I, like Ms. Bowman, understood at town meeting that the whole purpose here was to redevelop almost every one of those red brick buildings that were built in the 60s when the town redeveloped it the first time, about 30 years ago, have for lease signs on them. We recognized that at town meeting that we really wanted to redevelop those. So the first project that we did was to strip mine 9 acres of Pine Grove and prepare to put in housing project, 5-story buildings. This second project, if you will, in that same general area, is at the far end of 129, and my understanding at town meeting was we didn't want to encourage a bunch of traffic, arguably, through the center and down 129 from 495 that direction. We kind of wanted it to come the other direction, over by Route 129 and Route 3, that direction, not the other. So in order to have a restaurant at this end of the property, strip mine all the trees out of there, something just doesn't feel right to me as a town meeting rep and someone that knows that area very well. Having been traveling all over the country lately and having to eat at a lot of restaurants of late, these kind of restaurants in California and the Chicago area and Princeton, New Jersey, and those areas, they tend to leave the trees up, the old trees that were there, to try to give you some ambiance. And I've got to tell you, when you pull into a strip mall kind of a restaurant, you might as well be eating at a pizza joint. If I see the project here with a whole lot of former green space, if there was any chance that you could save, let's count, 3 trees out of that whole forest there, 4 trees maybe over the parking lot. It's incredible how hot the ground gets. Walked to my car in the street the other day and burned the heck out of my bare feet. The pavement gets real hot. So people tend to want to congregate under the shade of a tree. The project on Turnpike Road, they strip mined all of them. They're gone. And then when the trucks came in, they actually left a little buffer between the single family houses and this. And when the trucks came in, I actually complained about the trucks blocking Turnpike Road in the wrong direction. The very next day, they cut down all the rest of the trees. Probably my fault that they cut down those buffer trees. But if the developer would look at this and think about the property next door, maybe run a line, leave a line of trees there, a couple in the parking lot, that would be real nice. The rest of the country recognizes trees as being valuable. And maybe you can pick a few out that are prime trees that you could actually save and make that restaurant look a little bit better. In addition, traffic concerns. When you come off 495 and you want to turn left at the 110 exit to come down Golden Cove Road to access this, to get to this place, only 2 cars can turn right before they fill in the slot. We made a left-hand turn to go to North Chelmsford on the 110 side of the fence there. So once those 2 cars park in the right-hand side, you can't go on Golden Cove anymore. You have to wait for the light to change green. You can't turn right on red, if you will. You're going to have to adjust that, maybe do a cut there. You're going to have to do something about the intersection that's just to the west of this at Golden Cove Turnpike and Billerica Road. I've been going out that way to work every morning, and with the exception of 4 days in the last month, 4 days I've seen no cars run the red light while I'm waiting for my light to turn green on Turnpike Road at Billerica Road. Today, I've been filming it too, if you don't believe me, like DOT did not believe me. Today, I turned my camera off after my light turned green and a car came down Billerica Road, pure red. Couldn't have even been closer. So you're going to have to adjust that light in order for people to get to this restaurant and fill the 132 parking spaces there from the side of town that you said we did not want to encourage cars and traffic. The residents that live in there have been there for about 100 years. We stuck a salt shed directly behind their house, promptly filled it and spilled it out the back of the salt shed, creating a hazmat condition, in my view, having been in a chemical company for a long time. If you don't believe me there, you can look at the satellite image on Google Maps. It still shows up in that one. And then you're allowing a property to be strip mined around the other side of these folks where their families lived there for 100 years. I think that's a tough thing for a resident to look at and see. appreciate your time. Please consider keeping some of the trees, a couple here and there. Maybe we can keep a squirrel or two over there instead of on my yard. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Brian. Would anybody else like to speak? All right, I don't see anybody waving their hands. Folks, are we?
You want a motion to close the public
Yeah, I
hearing?
think we can do
I'll give
that.
you a motion to close the public hearing.
In a second.
I have a motion and second to close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Motion to approve?
Well, do we have any discussion we want to consider here?
I think we'll beat it up quite a bit.
Okay, I'll certainly entertain the motion.
Second.
I have a motion and I have a second. Further comments? In favor?
Aye.
Aye. Show it,
We'll draft the decision and get it to the board for deliberation.
and you heard the couple of
Yep.
comments that Ed made. You can put
Yes.
those in.
Yeah, if you didn't get them, you can call me and I'll go over them with them.
Thank you.
Sure, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good night.
All right, what else do we have on our list?
Minutes?
We have one set of minutes.
Oh, yeah.
That's about it. Oh, we need to talk about location. Are you gonna?
We can figure that. You can't find something that's open.
Seeing as we've already posted the meeting for the 22nd, and noticed it, I don't think there's a heck of a lot we can do for the 22nd. What we can do,
We'll have to find a place too that's.
yeah, well, see if you can find a place, because if we do get a whole lot of people, my suspicion is that
We're
that
gonna
public
get-
hearing will continue.
You're gonna get a whole lot of
I
people.
think Ed's suggestion, Northtown Hall, that was a good one.
Northtown Hall's about,
Yeah, senior center actually would.
Yeah.
That's a
Bigger.
nice
There's no
venue.
easy place to televise.
Well, see what you can find. Yeah, we know they can televise out of senior center. We see that twice a year.
With the truck.
Yeah,
With the
but that-
truck.
Not an
But that's
easy thing.
expensive.
Oh, I don't know, but it adds a little class to the operation. See what you can find out, and if you can, see if you can tentatively arrange it for the first meeting in September.
So just while we're
Yep.
following up on Groton Road, I had maybe 15 items that I wrote down.
Yeah,
Were there any additional data points that the board wants to see developed and presented as part of the August
well, you
22nd?
got 15, I got 11, so I bet you've got all of mine.
Well, I mean, the biggest ones I heard were try to project some impacts associated with the 300 residential units. We can do that using industry standards. Also use some of the recent traffic studies that have been done, presented to the planning board. I can show the wetlands map.
Yes, I think we need to do that.
I think I showed that tonight.
The ones that are a little bit more challenging are the statement related to current residents do not believe there is a need for services, and they're asking for data.
Right, I'm not sure quite how we address that.
Yeah. Fill existing vacant space first is another kind of more policy
Yeah.
discussion I think the board needs to start thinking about.
Evan, do we have any up-to-date data on our current occupancy, commercial occupancy rates?
We do, yeah, we can provide that. I think
that would be
part
good
of
to
the
just add to
confusion,
the
and we may need to clarify this, is that there was a comment that not to become a 129.
Yeah.
And I think hopefully the board is aware that the proposed zoning is totally different than 129.
Right, utterly different.
So I think we may need to elaborate on the strategic planning goals and objectives as to how this isn't intended to be an office park. Therefore, not intended to compete with 129. Vinyl square impacts. Something else that we've already mentioned it as a board. I think we need to begin to give that some thought.
Yep.
You know, it may be worth updating the presentation to show what the potential is under the current zoning in terms of industrial development, as opposed to the potential under commercial zoning that it would change to.
Yep, good point.
How it would change the potentials in terms of what is today, and what could be what would be the available under the changes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think,
Yeah, it covers it.
yeah.
But certainly, if you have other thoughts, you can email me.
Yeah, can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think the presentation's got to change.
Yeah.
The presentation, I've heard the presentation, I don't know if it's 3 or 4 times now. And it's a financial presentation, and it goes on about the commercial spaces. And people on Lovett Lane and the other street, and even on Rotten Road, they literally don't give a hoot about that stuff.
Yeah.
You know, and
So maybe focusing on how the bylaw will protect existing neighborhoods.
yeah, I don't have it in my mind yet. I don't have it fully developed, but it's somehow, the presentation has to get away from, how much money is this going to give the town? Because first of all, you don't know that you're not going to have that money day
Projection,
one.
right.
It may take you 30 years to get that money. And more on how it's going to affect them. Because it's the same argument that we get on 205 and 192, or whatever the numbers are on 129, the last remaining houses. It's the same, it's the same argument. They were rezoned, whatever it is, 35 years ago, 30 or 35 years ago, and they're still there, which is great for them, because that's where they want to be.
All right, so add maybe some of the, what it means. We kind of talked about it tonight.
Yeah,
but
what
add
does it
some-
mean, what does it mean to the residents? In other words,
Be a pre-existing.
what would happen to them if all of a sudden the 2 large property owners, industrial property owners, threw their lot in together, sold that, and had a large development back there that was perfectly legal through the right-of-ways,
Which is what you're referring to.
through the streets?
What can they do today? What's
Yeah.
legal there today?
Yeah, excuse me for repeating you.
Yeah. No, that's okay.
Excuse me. Yeah.
I think you put it well.
Thank you.
Very good.
Oh, yeah, that's what.
Okay,
that's
well,
what
I guess.
Yeah, so I would add to what Ed said too, is I really appreciate the presentation that was put together. And it gives the town business background
Yeah.
for wanting this change. But the reality is that in order to make any zoning change, it's made by the representatives of the residents. And it's the residents' interests that the town meeting reps come to vote with. So that presentation has to address, why does this make the town better for the people that live here? Not just, why does it add to the tax base, but how does it make it better for the people that live here?
The compelling public
the-
interest.
The compelling reason why it's going to be a better place to live.
Yeah, if I could add to that, from the tone I heard tonight and saw the people, the amount of people you generated on that mailing, I don't think this, the way it stands right now, has a snowball's chance in hell of passing through the town meeting.
I think that's true.
I think the opposition's gonna be, even if you got half those people at the town meeting, the town meeting reps should stand up and take notice. I mean, years ago, a dentist, he's since died, wanted to change the zoning on 2 lots across from St. Mary's Church on North Road to put in that office building. Took him 3 town meetings, if I remember right, to get the zoning change through. And that was on 2 residential lots. It's, first of all, it's gotta get through the planning board, number 1. But if it goes to town meeting with the group of people we had here, I don't think it's gonna fly. That's why I just
Yeah.
wanted to add to.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
Are there other town boards or committees, organizations that you would like to hear from?
I'm not so sure that there's a lot to be gained there. I do have one additional thought, though, which is, and this is what I worry about for that neighborhood. We don't have a heck of a lot of control over what's happening on the Westford side of the line. Now, if that weren't a state road, then we could put in a limitation on the road and we could simply stop every asphalt truck that came through before 8 a.m. and then we could make life real hell for them. But we can't because it's a state road. So, but then similarly, we can't control the commercial development that Westford puts in there. And Westford, like any good smart town, will put their development where it bothers their people the least and the next town's people the most. And we do it too. So it's sort of standard operating procedure. If you could do a little bit of snooping, find out what the town of Westford has going over there and what the potential is for additional development on the Westford side of the line, I think it might inform our decision a bit.
Because you never know what's gonna happen with Fletcher's Quarry.
Right, you'd have no idea. I mean,
It's still a good sized
Yeah.
chunk of land.
Yeah, and, you know, because the Westford side is zoned industrial and they're continuing, commercial industrial,
Right.
and they're continuing to build it up, we could certainly make some projections about what will be happening to the traffic there, no matter what we do.
yeah. I mean,
In terms of the expectations of what that neighborhood's going to be like.
Yeah.
I have reason to be up at the senior center a little bit before 8 in the morning. And the traffic, and so I went out and I stationed myself near the town line after I dropped my wife off. And it's just a steady stream of traffic
Yeah.
coming out of Groton and Westford, headed for Route 3. It's just a steady stream.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's a main connector on a state route.
Yeah.
And it's a main commuter connector on a state route.
And I do think a lot of the traffic do jump right on the Route 3 at that point.
I think that,
Oh, yeah,
that was a
oh, yeah,
great
it does.
They're not going through.
All right.
It does.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, you got a list there. We probably shouldn't debate this further. It's
Actually,
really-
Mike, if I
Yeah.
could say a couple things. One, I think there's a misunderstanding, and maybe it needs to be woven into the presentation, is that this is more of a long-term vision for the
Yeah.
town as opposed to something we're doing today.
Right.
Right, now, the planning
That's
board,
true.
obviously,
That's
we
right.
do have some control over what's going to happen there, but ultimately, if you take the industrial side
Yeah.
of that area, we have no control, little
Right.
control there. But it's really, it's the people that were in this room tonight that control what's going to happen there.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm curious, you have, they said 4 people that actually already conveyed, and you have four properties that under agreement. So therefore, I mean, someone wants to move this project forward, and it's certainly not us here tonight that are making any decisions. So therefore, you know, if that area is rezoned, it's consistent with the long-term vision,
Yeah.
and they're ultimately in control. I mean, I think that needs to be stated somewhere in this presentation.
Well, see what you can do, Evan.
Yep.
All right. Do we want to take a look at these minutes?
Yeah, there's ones I
Yeah.
forgot last time.
Yeah. These are July 11th, I believe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't see any
Right
problem.
here? Yeah, July 11th.
Fine, you wanna?
Motion to make a motion?
Sure.
I'll make make a motion that we accept the meeting minutes for July 11th, 2018 as proposed.
I'll second it.
I had a motion, I have a second. Everybody ready?
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Let's see, I think the next,
I got another motion.
oh, you do?
Yeah.
You do?
Really?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Thank you, Henry.
You had to wake me up, Nan.